My name is Einar Kovacs, a former Hungarian Special Forces operative turned wilderness survival consultant. I have spent more years in tactical training rooms than in ordinary offices, but my fascination with remote, uncharted locations never waned. I thrive in environments most people would call lethal, a fact that often scares friends and colleagues, though they rarely say it aloud. I'm meticulous, patient, and endlessly curious, traits that have kept me alive in situations others wouldn't even attempt. I'm here in the Yukon Territory, deep in a stretch of taiga that few have ever tread. The expedition was supposed to be routine, survey and map a patch of forest in preparation for an ecological study. But routine, I quickly realized, has a habit of shifting into nightmare when the wilderness is involved. Snow falls constantly, a soft curtain that mutes the world, yet every footstep cracks like a rifle shot in the emptiness. The smell of pine is sharp and acrid, and beneath it a faint metallic tang that I can't quite identify lingers on the air, like iron rusted in some unseen stream. I notice things immediately: a branch that isn't broken the way it should be, animal tracks that vanish halfway across the snow, holes in the ice that seem too deliberate, too large for anything natural. I'm alone, my team back at base camp to catalog flora samples, leaving me with the silence of the wilderness and a creeping, almost imperceptible unease. The cold bites harder than expected, gnawing at the edges of my gloves and seeping into my bones despite layers of Gore-Tex and wool. My breath hisses in rhythm with my heart, each exhale a visible cloud that quickly disappears into the white haze surrounding me. Something shifts in the air, a subtle pressure, like the forest itself is holding its breath. I stop, my boots sinking into snow more damp than frozen, the crunch muffled as if someone has pressed a palm over the world. There's a movement in my periphery, a shadow flits behind a stand of birch. I twist sharply, rifle up, scanning. Nothing. Just the skeletal trees and the fog curling between them. My instincts scream caution, but my mind calculates wind patterns, snowdrift, animal behavior. There's no logical explanation for the sensation that I am being watched. I move on, deliberately slow. Every sound seems amplified: the snap of a twig underfoot, the distant caw of a raven, the scraping of what might be ice against rock. And then it comes, a whisper. Not a voice, not human, but a sound carried on the wind, almost like my name. I freeze. Einar. The syllable is soft, distorted, carried on a gust that rattles the branches above me. I know better than to respond, yet my pulse spikes, a reflexive acknowledgement that I am no longer merely observing the forest. I am part of its story, a note in its dark, ongoing symphony. I press forward, approaching the edge of a clearing. The snow here is pristine, untouched except for tracks I cannot immediately identify. Too wide for a wolf, too shallow for a bear. I crouch, studying them. Each print seems deliberate, measured. Someone or something is out here. My mind races. A trapper, lost hikers, but no equipment marks, no remnants of human presence, only footprints. And I know they lead deeper into the forest, away from safety. I follow. My training demands that I gather intelligence, and my gut insists I proceed with caution. As I enter the denser part of the woods, the temperature drops even further. Frost forms on my eyelashes, my breath quickens. The trees close in around me, skeletal sentinels leaning inward, casting long, sinister shadows even in the muted daylight. The forest smells of decay now, something under the snow and ice, like rot that hasn't thawed. My fingers brush against the bark, searching for any sign of struggle, of habitation. None. And then I see it. A structure, half hidden beneath a mound of snow. Not a cabin, not a natural formation. Something artificial, jagged, its shape wrong, as if it was built to be unsettling. I approach slowly, rifle at the ready. Every step feels deliberate, calculated, as though the forest itself is guiding me. The closer I get, the more I sense it. Eyes, or what could be eyes, staring from within the shadows of the structure. I freeze. My fingers tighten on the grip of my rifle. I can't tell if the eyes belong to a person, an animal, or something else entirely. They blink, or I blink, and they are gone. The silence presses in, heavier now, tangible. I notice the faintest trace of movement in the snow, patterns that don't correspond to footprints, but something else. Drag marks, long, deliberate. They disappear under the mound, ending where the structure begins. A thought crosses my mind, a tactical thought drilled into me over years of training. Retreat and reassess. But curiosity, that dangerous companion, urges me forward. My boots crunch across the snow as I circle the structure. There's a gap, a doorway perhaps, or a collapsed wall. I peer inside. The interior is darker than it should be, black as coal, yet I can make out shapes that don't belong, twisted, angular, yet somehow humanoid. I hear movement again, scraping, low, deliberate. Something is inside, waiting, watching. I step back, calculating my options. The cold seeps deeper now, but I barely notice. My body is primed for action, every nerve ending on alert. If this is a creature, it has intelligence. It has hunted before. The tracks outside, the deliberate dragging, the concealment, it all points to premeditation. I adjust my stance, check my rifle, review my escape routes mentally. The forest is both ally and adversary. Concealment for me, cover for it. A sound. A single sharp crack. From inside, something has moved. I aim, steadying my breathing, and speak softly, though I know the voice will not reach anything that could understand. I'm alone. I'm leaving. No response, only the hiss of the wind through the trees, carrying something else. A scent, metallic, acidic, like blood under frost. I step backward, snow muffling my retreat, trying to put distance between me and the unknown. The air grows heavier, charged, as though the forest itself has taken notice. And then I see them, another set of eyes, this time higher, watching from a branch, unnaturally still. My mind screams danger, but my body is frozen in awe and terror. Whatever this is, it is everywhere and nowhere at once. The rational part of me, the soldier, the survivor, urges flight. But another part, the part that has always sought out what others fear, whispers, follow, understand, survive. And that is when I realize the forest is not just hiding something. It is alive, sentient, waiting, orchestrating. And I am the intruder in a world that does not forgive mistakes. The cold bites deeper as I move back through the snow, each step echoing against the dense silence of the taiga. My fingers, despite gloves, are stiff, the rifle's grip slippery. I force myself to breathe methodically, each inhale sharp and icy, each exhale a visible plume that disappears into the gray haze. But my senses are alert in ways no training can fully prepare you for. Every rustle of the wind, every distant snap of frozen branches feels like an announcement. Something is tracking me. I glance toward the mound, the structure, the source of my unease, but it seems empty. Or perhaps it simply hides its presence, like the predator it clearly is. I take a careful step forward, circling wider, trying to find a better vantage point. And then I notice it, subtle distortions in the snow, shallow depressions that aren't footprints, patterns, rhythms almost too deliberate to be random. My mind parses them instantly. These are calculations, paths mapped out to intercept, trap, or observe. My pulse quickens, not from fear alone, but from recognition. This is a hunter, methodical, intelligent, thinking. The forest itself seems to respond. Shadows shift with unnatural timing. A branch, heavy with frost, quivers as though someone or something is leaning against it, observing. I freeze, rifle raised, scanning systematically. My eyes catch movement. A flash of white, too large for a wolf, too silent for a bear, vanishing behind a clump of birch. I pivot, tracking it, but the moment I think I've seen it clearly, it is gone. I whisper to myself a tactical mantra: observe, evaluate, respond. My military instincts kick in fully. I circle the mound again, keeping the sun at my back, trying to predict where it could emerge, and then the first direct interaction occurs. A soft, deliberate tap against the snow near my foot. Nothing visible, just the echo against my boots. My breath catches. I scan. Still nothing. And then a movement in the corner of my vision. A figure, crouched, humanoid but wrong, too angular, too elongated, disappearing behind a tree. Every instinct screams at me to retreat, but my curiosity, that dangerous companion, anchors me. I take a calculated step closer. My rifle is raised, finger poised on the trigger, but I hesitate. The creature or entity does not move like an animal. No instinctual scatter, no panic. It is deliberate, patient, observing my reactions, testing my limits. I realize I am dealing with something more than brute strength. It has strategy. A sharp wind blows through the forest, rattling branches like bones. The shadow shifts again, closer this time, merging with the darkness under a stand of spruce. My heart pounds in rhythm with the crackling of frozen foliage underfoot. I consider my options: engage, flee, or hide. Engaging could provoke it, fleeing could draw it out of hiding, and hiding may buy time but not safety. My experience tells me the first rule here: never underestimate the predator. I retreat slowly, deliberate, keeping my eyes on the shadow. As I move, I notice something horrifying: small, like deliberate marks on the trees, claw-like grooves, fresh, as if it's been marking territory, communicating in some way. And the air carries an almost imperceptible hum, vibrating against my eardrums, resonating with the tension in my body. I realize it is aware of my mental state, feeding on my anxiety, adapting its tactics to my responses. Then the direct attack, a crackling sound behind me, rapid, like snapping ice. I spin, rifle raised. Nothing, but the snow erupts as if something was beneath it, sending shards scattering. And there it is, a figure emerging from the shadows. I see it fully now, and every survival instinct in me screams terror and awe. It is humanoid, but impossibly thin, unnaturally tall, with limbs that bend in ways no human body should. Its face is obscured, featureless, yet I feel eyes, intelligent, calculating, piercing me, reading my mind. I fire. My rifle echoes through the forest, and the creature doesn't flinch. It moves with unnatural speed, circling me, testing, observing. I realize this is no ordinary predator. It is learning, adapting to my movements. Bullets do not scare it, only slow it, only irritate it. And it wants a response. I switch tactics. Retreating in straight lines is predictable. I weave, climb small rises, use tree trunks for cover, attempt to manipulate its perception. My training allows me to anticipate ambushes, but this is beyond conventional tactics. Every step, every breath must be calculated. I hear it mimicking sounds, the rustle of my gear, my sharp exhale, the snap of my boots, as though it's studying me like a student learning a new equation. Then it strikes, faster than I expect. A rush of cold wind, a shadow blurring across the snow toward me. I dive to the side, rifle up, firing instinctively. It disappears again, leaving only a faint mark on the snow where it was, almost like a signature. My heart hammers, adrenaline surges, but I can't let panic dictate my actions. I analyze, I notice patterns. It seems to avoid the dense snow under the spruce, preferring open stretches where movement is visible and predictable. I formulate a plan, a bait, a trap of my own. I move carefully, leading it toward the structure, toward areas where I can manipulate cover and sight lines. My mind races, piecing together the few seconds of intelligence I've gathered. And I realize the forest is its weapon, the snow its terrain, and I am merely a player in its game. I pause, taking shelter behind a snow-laden pine. The cold burns my exposed face, but I focus. My pulse is a metronome. I wait. Then, a whisper again, soft, taunting, carried on the wind. I hear my name, distorted, elongated, coming from multiple directions at once. My skin crawls. The creature is everywhere, yet nowhere. And then a sound that freezes my blood. The dragging again, long, deliberate, toward me. I realize the truth in a chilling instant. This isn't a creature hunting for food. It's a hunter studying prey, testing my instincts, learning and adapting in real time. My training, my instincts, even my experience in life and death scenarios, none of it prepared me for intelligence like this, alien and precise. I make my move. I sprint, zigzag, leading it toward a thicket where visibility is limited. I can hear it following faster than any predator should be capable. Branches whip at my face, snow clings to my clothing, and each step is agony, but I press on. I must survive, not just fight. I must think, adapt, be smarter than this entity. The forest opens slightly, a small clearing. My mind calculates the next move. I can't fight it head on, I must outsmart it. I glance at the mound, the structure, and a plan forms. I run toward it, using the jagged walls as partial cover, and hear it hesitate for the briefest fraction of a second. I slip inside, crouching low, scanning the black interior. It doesn't follow immediately. I can hear the snow shifting outside, the faintest scrape, then silence. I wait. My breath hisses in the frozen air, every muscle tense, every nerve screaming, and somewhere in the shadows, I know it is watching, learning, waiting. The interior of the mound is black, almost liquid in its darkness. My eyes strain against the gloom, rifle raised, every muscle taut. The snow outside shifts again, a faint, deliberate scraping that echoes like claws on metal. I know it's studying me, learning my habits, predicting my next move. I press my back against the wall, listening. Every breath is audible to me, but I suspect it hears even the smallest vibrations. I check my surroundings. Broken beams, jagged wood, and snow-streaked walls offer minimal cover, but I improvise, using the angles to mask my silhouette. My mind races through strategies. I can't fight this creature head-on. It's faster, stronger, and most terrifyingly intelligent. I must outthink it. I move cautiously, each footstep measured, each shift of weight deliberate. Then the sound comes from above. A soft thud and frost-laden debris shakes from the ceiling. I look up. In the shadows of the wooden beams, I see it, perched like some predatory bird, impossibly tall, limbs bending at unnatural angles. Its face remains featureless, yet I feel those invisible eyes boring into me. My chest tightens. I remind myself, control fear, control the environment, control the outcome. I whisper to myself tactical instructions, observe patterns, wait for overconfidence, exploit mistake. I slide along the wall, moving toward a narrow exit I had noticed, where the mound's interior meets a fallen tree, a potential trap for the entity. My pulse hammers in my ears. Every instinct tells me that one misstep could end my life. A sudden sound, a rustle beneath my feet, makes me freeze. The creature has entered silently, no snow crunching, no leaves snapping. It is here, close. I feel its presence like a physical weight, pressing on my senses. Then I hear it, a whisper again, distorted, almost teasing. My name, but it is not human. The sound twists in the air, bends toward me. My throat tightens, adrenaline surges. I act. I spring toward the narrow exit, using my body to knock loose snow and debris, aiming to create distraction and cover. It reacts instantly, moving with unnatural speed, intercepting the path I'd calculated. I dive to the side as rolling across the snow-dense floor. My rifle discharges reflexively, once, twice, and the echo is deafening in the small space. The entity recoils not in pain, but in recognition. It studies me, adapts, and then it moves again, faster than my eyes can track, circling, cutting off math. My mind races. I need a solution beyond brute force. My fingers fumble for flares in my pack, a desperate attempt to create confusion. I ignite one. The red flare casts grotesque shadows across the walls, illuminating its form. Tall, angular, impossibly thin, limbs like branches stripped bare. It hesitates, just for a moment, long enough for me to bolt. I leap toward the mound's back exit, snow crunching sharply underfoot, leaving flares scattered behind to mask my trail. The wind bites my face, cold and merciless, but I push through, using trees as cover. I hear it moving, silent, deliberate, above, around, everywhere at once. I can't tell how close it is, only that it is there, still watching, still hunting. I reach a shallow ravine, the snow thicker, deeper. My boots sink, slowing me, but I know the terrain can be both a hindrance and a tool. I sprint diagonally, zigzagging, forcing it to adjust. Every instinct, every muscle honed through years of survival training, keeps me moving. I glance back once, no figure, no shadow, only the faintest imprint in the snow, almost imperceptible, like it moved without disturbing the surface. My stomach tightens, the intelligence here is alien. Hours, or perhaps minutes, time is distorted, pass. I find a frozen creek, a natural barricade. Ice cracks under my weight. I pause, rifle raised, surveying. The forest is deceptively quiet now. Too quiet. I remember every detail, every sound, every irregularity in the snow. And then the creeping realization, it hasn't pursued directly. It hasn't attacked. It is still out there, watching, learning, waiting. I press forward cautiously, following the creek downstream. Every step is calculated, every breath deliberate. The wind shifts, carrying a faint metallic tang again, like iron, like blood. My skin prickles. The mound, the tracks, the shadows, they are not mere remnants. They are signals, warnings, lessons. I begin to understand This place is territory, and I am still under observation. Finally, I see signs of civilization, a snow-covered ranger's cabin in the distance. My pulse surges with hope, relief, battling lingering terror. But even as I approach, I know something vital. The encounter isn't over. The forest's silence is too deliberate, too intelligent. I step carefully toward the cabin, listening. Every crack of ice, every whisper of wind feels like communication, like the entity is informing me, reminding me it is still here. I reach the cabin, breath ragged, body exhausted. I slam the door shut behind me, bolting it. The warm interior is a brief comfort, but I cannot shake the feeling that the forest, the mound, the entity, it all continues outside. Waiting, calculating, watching. My survival is temporary, a fragile bubble of safety, and deep in my mind I know this. I have not escaped, only survived for now. And as night falls over the Yukon, the snow outside still pristine, untouched except for footprints that appear too deliberate to be human, I realize the chilling truth. The forest does not forgive and it does not forget. Somewhere in the shadows, beyond vision, the entity waits, patient and intelligent, and one day it will resume its silent game. I am alive, but I am not safe. Not yet. My name is Leonard Leo Straka, 38 years old, born in Brno, Czech Republic, and for the past 12 years I've worked as a glaciologist with the European Polar Research Institute. I'm methodical by nature, the type who counts the minutes of a sunrise and documents the shifting shadows of ice cliffs. Colleagues always called me cautious, even obsessive, but in environments where a wrong step could mean falling into a crevasse or being crushed under shifting ice, obsession is just another word for survival. I had been sent on assignment to the northern fringes of the Greenland ice sheet, where satellite images had revealed an unusual formation, a series of deep fissures running in concentric circles. It didn't make geological sense, and the Institute wanted answers. I wanted answers, too, because beneath my scientific curiosity was a stubborn need to solve patterns others couldn't. The flight that brought me to the field station had been turbulent, the propeller engines whining above the howl of Arctic winds. When the pilot dropped me off on the airstrip and the small plane vanished back into gray skies, silence swallowed me. The station, a prefabricated metal structure squatting on the ice like a stranded insect, creaked as if alive in the cold. The air was sharp, laced with the metallic tang of frozen iron, and every breath seared my lungs before fogging in front of me. I remember the light most of all, a pale, perpetual twilight, where the sun hovered low, casting bruised streaks of orange and violet across the snow. Shadows stretched impossibly long, bending and twisting over the uneven ice, so that sometimes I caught myself staring, convinced someone else stood nearby. The silence was broken only by the occasional crack of shifting ice, like a distant rifle shot. The first unusual detail came on my second evening. I had ventured a few hundred meters from the station, dragging the ground-penetrating radar sled. The snow beneath me was strangely soft, as though something had tunneled beneath. The instruments registered voids where there should have been solid ice, vast, echoing gaps hidden just under the surface. But it wasn't the readings that unsettled me. It was the faint sound of knocking. 3 slow, deliberate raps that seemed to echo up from the glacier's belly. At first I dismissed it as ice shifting under pressure, but when I pressed my ear to the frozen crust, the knocks came again. Spaced, patient, purposeful. That night in the station, as the wind rattled the metal walls, I replayed the recordings from my equipment. Buried under static, I caught something I still struggle to describe. Not knocks, but a low, rhythmic pulse, as if the glacier itself had a heartbeat. I told myself it was nothing, that isolation was playing tricks. Still, I set out the next morning, determined to follow the fissures deeper. The concentric cracks formed an almost perfect circle, 1/2 kilometer wide, like the rim of a buried crater. My boots crunched over snow hardened to glass, and with every step I felt the ground reverberate faintly, as if walking across a drumhead stretched too tight. Anxiety began to coil inside me, sharp and electric. I knew enough to trust my instincts out here. The Arctic doesn't forgive hesitation. Yet I couldn't turn back. The pattern demanded an explanation. Halfway to the center of the formation, I noticed something in the ice. At first, I thought it was a trapped air bubble, but as I crouched down, brushing frost away, I saw a shape embedded meters below the surface. It looked disturbingly like a hand, elongated, jointed, wrong. The fingers too many. My breath fogged the ice, and for a moment, I thought I saw the fingers twitch. I stumbled back, nearly dropping my instrument case. The rational part of me whispered that shifting ice and refraction could create illusions, but another part, the primal human part, knew I had seen movement. As I set up camp equipment near the fissure, my thoughts turned restless. My hands shook as I boiled snow for water, and I kept glancing back at the patch of ice where the shape had been. The wind carried strange tones through the cracks in the glacier, not quite howls, not quite voices, but something that mimicked both. That night, unable to sleep, I stepped outside. The sky was veiled in auroras, green fire dancing like restless spirits. And at the very center of the concentric fissures, the ice glowed faintly, not from above, but from within, as though something beneath the glacier was casting its own sickly light. I whispered into the cold, "What the hell are you?" My voice vanished, swallowed by the Arctic void. The ice answered with a knock. The next morning, I forced myself to write the previous night off as exhaustion. The Arctic does that. It digs into your mind, makes you see faces in ice and hear whispers in wind. But as I reviewed my data logs over bitter coffee, I saw that the instruments had indeed recorded a spike, a vibration pulse repeating every 13 minutes, as steady as the tick of a metronome. No natural formation pulses like that. I packed extra rations and set out again, sled dragging behind me, the horizon folding into endless white. Every few minutes, I tapped my chest, reassuring myself that the radio was there, clipped and working. Not that it mattered. The nearest manned station was over 100 kilometers away, and atmospheric interference here made transmission unreliable. Still, clinging to procedure was how I kept fear from clawing its way up my throat. The fissures seemed wider than yesterday. My rational mind told me that couldn't be true. Glaciers shift, yes, but not overnight and not so uniformly. Yet, when I planted my boots near the rim, I swore the crack extended a hand's breadth wider than it had. As I lowered the radar probe into the opening, the screen shivered with static before displaying a cavernous void, at least 50 meters deep. Something moved in that void. At first, it was just a shadow sliding across the screen, then a distortion, as though the probe's signal bent around something dense, too symmetrical, too deliberate. My pulse quickened, and I yanked the probe back up. For a second, I felt resistance, as though something below tugged gently, playfully, before letting go. By the time I stumbled back to the station, the sky had dimmed into its perpetual dusk. Inside, the heaters hummed, but I couldn't shake the cold. My gloves lay discarded on the floor where I'd dropped them, and I stared at my hands, fingers trembling, nails bluish despite the warmth. It felt like the ice had seeped into my bones. That night, I heard the knocking again, not distant this time. It came through the walls of the station itself. 3 slow raps, pausing, then 3 again. As though something below had traced my steps, followed me home. I tried to drown it with the radio, static hissing in my ears, but the rhythm bled through the noise, syncing with my heartbeat. I didn't sleep. When dawn, if you could call it that, broke, I left the safety of the station and marched back toward the fissures, desperate to face whatever was stalking me. Better to confront a terror than to let it gnaw unseen. The concentric cracks had spread further, now unmistakably forming a circle, a boundary. I realized with a jolt that I had been working inside it since my arrival. At the center of the ring, the glow I had glimpsed was brighter, flickering like phosphorescence trapped under glass. Kneeling, I brushed snow away until my knuckles scraped bare ice. And then I saw it. A face. Pressed against the ice from below, distorted by thickness, but human, or nearly human. Its eyes were shut, lips parted slightly. The features were elongated, stretched, as though time itself had pulled at them. I recoiled, a choked cry escaping my throat. But when I blinked, the eyes opened. They were pale, luminous, watching me. I staggered backward, slipped, and fell hard on my pack. My first instinct was to run, but training held me. Panic kills. Assess. React. Survive. I forced myself to watch as the face sank deeper into the ice, vanishing into shadow. In its place, the glacier pulsed, light rippling outward in concentric waves, echoing the rhythm I'd been hearing. Not ice shifting, not geology, something alive. I abandoned the probe, abandoned the equipment, and staggered back toward the station. Every crunch of my boots seemed answered by another, just out of sync, as though something mirrored my steps a beat behind. The air had thinned, pressing against my chest, and the silence of the Arctic now rang with a low hum, bone deep. When the station came into sight, relief should have flooded me. Instead, dread clenched tighter. The door was ajar. I had locked it before leaving. Inside, nothing looked disturbed until I noticed my logbook open on the desk. A page I hadn't written on, filled with neat, deliberate lines in ink I didn't own. 3 words repeated across the page: "We are here." The pen lay beside it, still wet. My gloved hand shook as I touched the page. The ink smeared under my finger, proof it wasn't a hallucination. That was when the radio crackled alive. No static this time. A voice. It was my voice, repeating the same 3 words. I slammed the radio off, but the silence was worse. The words still echoed in my skull. My own voice, not distorted, not fragmented, but clear, deliberate, as if some part of me had already betrayed the rest. I paced the station, clenching and unclenching my fists, forcing breath into a steady rhythm. Science. Procedure. Data. These were the anchors I'd relied on my entire life. I couldn't abandon them now, not even when logic itself was crumbling under the ice. I grabbed my notebook and began to write down everything, even the impossible. Every minute accounted for, every sensation described. But as I wrote, I noticed something chilling. My handwriting had started to slip. The neat, tight lines I'd always prided myself on were loosening, curving into the same looping script that filled the mysterious page. I dropped the pen, my stomach turning. That was when the station lights flickered. Once, twice, then went out. The heater clicked dead. The radio whined. Only the faint green shimmer of the aurora filtered through the frosted window, and beneath it, the knocking resumed, not from below this time, from the door. 3 slow raps, a pause, then 3 more. I forced myself closer, each step a battle against the primal terror urging me to hide. My gloved hand trembled as I unlatched the deadbolt. I didn't open the door, God no, but I leaned close, pressing my ear to the metal. Breathing, shallow, human. "Who's there?" I croaked, my voice dry, cracking. Silence. Then faintly, "Leo." My name, whispered in my own cadence. I staggered back, kicking over a chair. Whoever, whatever, was outside had my voice. I snatched the flare gun from its case, aimed it shakily at the door, though it felt like pointing a child's toy at a storm. The knocking stopped. For a while, there was nothing but the sound of my heartbeat and the hiss of wind. Then the station creaked, deep and groaning, as though something massive pressed against its frame. The walls bowed inward a fraction, then released. I braced myself for collapse, but after a moment the pressure eased. By morning, the power hadn't returned. I scavenged rations and checked the emergency beacon, but it was dead. Battery intact, wires intact, yet no light. As if the signal itself had been swallowed. I couldn't stay. The fissure, the glow, the face, I needed answers, or at least a way to prove I hadn't lost my mind. If I brought back photographs, data, something tangible, I could survive this. I convinced myself of it. I loaded the sled with the remaining instruments, strapped on climbing gear, and returned to the concentric circle. The ice pulsed faintly beneath my boots, and every vibration seemed to crawl up my bones. At the center, the glow throbbed brighter. Kneeling, I set the camera tripod, forcing my shaking hands steady. But as the lens focused, the ice shifted. Shapes moved beneath, dozens of them. Faces. Not frozen corpses, not illusions of air bubbles. Living. Their eyes flicked open in unison, pale and luminous, staring up at me. My breath hitched, and the camera slipped from my grip, clattering onto the ice. The ground shuddered. A fissure tore open beneath my feet, splitting wide with a sound like the world breaking. I threw myself back, scrambling on hands and knees as a chasm yawned where I had stood. Heat rolled up from it, impossibly, the breath of something vast and alive. And from the depths rose a sound. Not knocking now. Not pulses. Laughter. High and distorted, but eerily familiar, my own laugh echoing back at me. I stumbled to my feet, rope tangled around my boots, and fired the flare gun into the chasm. The red light streaked down, illuminating the walls of ice. For a heartbeat, I saw them. Limbs stretching, bodies pressed into the glacier, shifting as though swimming beneath the surface. Too many arms, too many faces, all moving in sickening harmony. The flare winked out, swallowed. The laughter grew louder, layered, my voice overlapping itself in grotesque chorus. I ran. Dragging the sled, stumbling, falling, clawing my way across the snow. The circle of fissures seemed endless, twisting the horizon no matter which way I turned. I realized then that I hadn't been walking outward. I was spiraling deeper. By the time I collapsed, lungs burning, the station loomed ahead. Relief surged until I saw the smoke, black tendrils curling into the twilight sky. The station was burning. Yet even through the flames, I saw movement inside. Shadows pacing, deliberate, tall and thin. And over the crackle of fire came my own voice again, this time not a whisper, but a shout. Leo, let us in. The fire should have terrified me more than the voices. A research station in flames meant no heat, no supplies, no chance of rescue. But as I stood there, chest heaving, the smoke curling into the bruised sky, it wasn't the fire that froze me. It was the way the shadows inside moved. They didn't flinch from the flames. They didn't choke or cough or flee. They drifted from wall to wall like actors on a stage, their silhouettes flickering long and thin, distorted by the light. And above it all, my own voice boomed, layered on itself, sometimes whispering, sometimes laughing, sometimes calling my name with the affection of an old friend. Leo, Leo, you came back. I gripped the flare gun like it could save me, though it was useless now. One flare spent, one remaining. A toy against a leviathan. My training screamed at me to retreat, to conserve strength, to ration air and heat. But where would I go? The horizon stretched in every direction, the same circle of fissures repeating itself like a labyrinth with no exit. The door of the station creaked open. Through the smoke, I saw a figure step out. My stomach clenched. It was me. Same parka, same gait, even the same scar above the brow from when I fell into a crevasse years ago. He raised his hand in greeting, smiling with my mouth, but the teeth were too many. Finally, he said, voice smooth, confident, the kind of voice I wished I had. You found us. I stumbled backward, boots slipping on the ice. My double's smile never faltered, even as fire licked his sleeve. The flames didn't consume him. They bent away, almost afraid to touch. You don't belong up there, Leo, he continued, pointing down at the ice. His hand shook slightly, not from weakness, but from strain, as though countless others pulled it from beneath. You belong here, with us. The fissures behind me cracked louder, a chorus of knocks answering his words. The ice pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. I realized with a sick certainty they weren't knocking to be let out. They were knocking to guide me in. I ran. Not toward the horizon, but toward the only other place I hadn't dared, the heart of the glow. The ice at the center blazed faintly, the concentric rings spreading outward like ripples on water. Each step closer, the air thickened, vibrating through my chest like standing too near a subwoofer. My ears rang, my vision blurred, but still I pressed on. Behind me, the echo of my double's laughter carried on the wind, not chasing, waiting. He knew where I was going. They all did. At the very center, the glow pulsed beneath a thin crust of ice. Kneeling, I struck it with my ice axe. The blade cracked through with a sound sharp as glass. Light poured out, blinding, forcing me to shield my eyes. When the glare subsided, I saw stairs, carved not by man, but by pressure, by something ancient and deliberate. They spiraled down into the glacier, glowing faintly with that same sickly phosphorescence. Each step pulsed, beckoning. My body screamed at me to stop, to run, to fight, to live. But my mind, my cursed obsessive mind, whispered that this was the pattern I had been chasing all along. The circle, the heartbeat, the faces, it had always led here. I descended. The air grew warmer, humid even, now carrying the stench of brine and iron. The walls around me shifted, faces pressed against them, mouths opening and closing in silent laughter. Some looked like strangers, some looked like me. I pressed forward, refusing to meet their gaze. At the bottom I reached a cavern, vast, hollow, a chamber carved into the glacier's belly. The ice walls pulsed with veins of light, throbbing in time with my own pulse. And in the center stood a mass. At first I thought it was a column of ice, but then it moved, slow, breathing. The surface shimmered with countless pale eyes, opening and closing in waves. Its shape was impossible to pin down, shifting from pillar to arch to spiral. My knees buckled at the sight, nausea rising. And then it spoke. Not with words, not with sound, but directly in my mind. A flood of voices, all of them mine. Every laugh, every cry, every word I'd ever spoken, layered and distorted. You are part of the pattern. I dropped to my knees, clutching my skull. Images seared my mind, endless ice sheets folding into themselves, faces pressed beneath frozen walls, my own body walking among them, smiling as though at home. I realized then the truth that shattered everything I'd believed. I wasn't just studying the glacier. I was already inside it. The cavern's light flared, and the last thing I remember before blacking out was the sensation of countless hands reaching from the walls, brushing my face tenderly, pulling me inward. When I woke, the world was silent. At first, I thought I was back in the station, sprawled on the metal floor after fainting. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw walls of ice all around me, glowing faintly, as though the glacier itself was alive. The cavern was gone, or had folded into something smaller, tighter, suffocating. My breath misted, but the air was warm and wet, like exhaling into a mask. I tried to move. My arms obeyed sluggishly as though underwater. When I lifted them, I saw frost clinging to my sleeves, but beneath it, the faint impression of fingers, dozens of them, as though hands had been pressed against me while I slept. The thought nearly broke me. I forced myself upright, boots slipping on the slick ice. My flare gun was still in its holster, my last lifeline. I held it close, though I knew a single red streak couldn't harm what pulsed around me. The walls shifted. Not cracked, not creaked, shifted like lungs inflating. And through that movement, I heard whispers. At first they were faint, like wind trickling through stone, then clearer. My mother's voice, my old professor's. A woman I once loved, each one speaking in soft fragments, coaxing, urging. Stay, Leo. You've done enough up there. You belong with us. Every voice had weight. They weren't random hallucinations. They carried memory, inflection, rhythm. They were stolen from my life. I stumbled backward until my shoulders hit the wall. It pulsed warmly against me, and I felt something give like soft tissue beneath a membrane. The ice was no longer solid. It yielded slightly, like it could swallow me if I pressed harder. No, I rasped. My voice sounded small, foreign. I don't belong here. I'm alive. A chorus of laughter rippled through the chamber, and the wall bulged outward. For an instant, a face pushed against it, my own face, but distorted, smiling with lips split too wide. Alive is relative. The words thundered inside my skull, rattling teeth, vibrating bones. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head. Every instinct screamed to escape, to run. But where? The stairs were gone, the opening sealed. Only the glow remained, throbbing stronger, brighter, as if feeding on my fear. I tried to anchor myself, think like a scientist. If this thing was real, it could be observed, measured. If it had structure, it could be escaped. I yanked the camera from my pack, miraculously still there, and flicked it on. The lens whirred, the red light blinked. I raised it shakily to capture the wall. The screen filled with static. Then, shapes. Not the cavern. Not the ice. My station. Burning as I had seen it from the outside. Only this time, inside the flames, I saw myself walking calmly, unaffected, smiling. Behind me, shadows filled the room, each one taller, broader, moving in unnatural synchrony. The camera whined, then snapped. The screen went dark. I hurled it against the wall. It didn't shatter, it was absorbed, swallowed like food. I pressed my back to the opposite wall, gasping. My thoughts spiraled. Maybe the glacier wasn't trapping me. Maybe it was showing me what I already was. Maybe the pattern wasn't forming around me. I was part of it from the beginning. The whispers hushed. The glow dimmed. For the first time since I'd arrived, silence fell. Then came the knocking, not from below, not from above, from inside me. 3 dull thuds reverberating through my ribs. I clutched my chest, panic flooding every nerve. My heart stuttered, sinking with the rhythm. The knocks weren't imitating my pulse was imitating them. I staggered forward, desperate, fumbling for the flare gun. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped it. I jammed the muzzle against the glowing wall, my last defiance. "Let me go!" I screamed, the sound tearing my throat raw. For a second, nothing. Then the wall split open with a groan, revealing blackness beyond. Not a tunnel, not a path, just void. Cold air rushed in, searing my skin. The whispers surged again, angry this time. I fired. The flare streaked into the dark, exploding in a red blossom. For the first time, I saw the full cavern, not ice, but a vast hollow sphere, walls crawling with bodies half embedded, their faces slack, eyes wide, mouths moving silently. Some were strangers, some were me. The flare sputtered out. Darkness crashed back, but I had seen enough to know one thing. Escape wasn't about running. It was about refusing to be absorbed. I clutched the empty gun and whispered to myself, "I'm still me. I'm still me." The walls pulsed in reply, as though laughing. The dark pressed closer, alive with the memory of the flare's brief light. I could still see their faces imprinted in my vision, hundreds, thousands, pressed into the walls, eyes glowing faintly like dying embers. Every one of them was watching me, waiting. I staggered along the cavern's curve, boots scraping ice. My body felt heavy, each step slower, as if the glacier were tightening its grip with every heartbeat. My chest still thudded in that alien rhythm, not quite mine anymore. Then I heard footsteps, not echoes of mine, real footsteps, crunching over ice in perfect counterpoint. I spun, flare gun raised though it was empty, my breath plumed in frantic bursts. From the black emerged a figure, me again, or some version of me. His parka was pristine, untouched by frost, his skin pale and glowing faintly like the faces in the walls. He smiled, calm, kind, the way I imagined I must look in my rare moments of peace. "You're making this harder than it has to be," he said, voice gentle. "We're not your enemy." I shook my head, retreating until my back pressed against the pulsing wall. "You're not me." He tilted his head, still smiling. "I'm the part you've always hidden, the part that belongs here. You felt it the moment you arrived. The circle, the pattern. We didn't trick you, Leo. You came willingly." The cavern thrummed in agreement, the whispers swelling, faces pressed harder against the ice, mouths moving faster until the walls seemed to chatter like 1,000 teeth. I clutched the empty flare gun tighter, my last pathetic weapon. "I don't belong to you," I rasped. He sighed, disappointed, as if I were a stubborn child. "Then prove it." He lunged. Not fast, not violent, deliberate. I raised the gun by instinct and swung it like a club, the metal cracking against his temple. For an instant, his skull caved inward like ice under a pick. No blood, no bone, just light spilling out. He staggered, grinning wider, and the wound closed as if it had never been. "You can't fight what you are," he whispered. I ran. The cavern stretched impossibly, spiraling in directions that didn't exist. The glow pulsed, sometimes in front of me, sometimes behind. Every time I thought I'd gained distance, I heard those footsteps again, me chasing me, closer each time. My lungs burned, legs trembling when I saw it, a fissure ahead, narrower than the others, splitting into the darkness. A way out, or another trap. I didn't care. I threw myself into it, scraping my shoulders raw on jagged ice. The passage twisted, steep, forcing me to crawl. The whispers dimmed, the glow fading behind. For a moment, only my own ragged breaths filled the void. I crawled faster, ignoring the pain, ignoring the blood dripping from my scraped palms. Then I heard it again. Knocking. Not behind this time. Ahead. 3 dull thuds echoing through the passage walls, waiting for me. I froze, chest heaving, sweat freezing against my neck. If I turned back, I'd face him. If I went forward, I'd meet whatever waited with that patient rhythm. Either way, I was trapped. A laugh bubbled from my throat, raw and broken. The glacier had already won, hadn't it? It didn't need to kill me. It only needed me to choose which version of myself I'd become. I closed my eyes, pressed my forehead to the ice, and whispered, "I'm still me." Over and over, like a prayer. The knocking stopped. In its place came silence, pure, heavy, crushing. And then, faintly, impossibly, I felt cold air, real cold, dry, sharp, Arctic air. My eyes snapped open. Ahead, a faint gray light seeped through a crack in the passage. I crawled toward it, sobbing, clawing with numb fingers. The ice tore skin from my hands, but I didn't stop. At last, I broke through, tumbling onto the open snow. The sky stretched above me, twilight bleeding green with aurora. Wind scoured my face, sharp and real. I lay there shaking, laughing, crying all at once. I had escaped. But as I staggered to my feet, I saw the truth. The fissures still encircled me, concentric rings stretching out across the horizon. The station was gone, swallowed. The world outside the circle looked distant, unreachable, distorted like a mirage. And when I pressed a trembling hand to my chest, I felt it still. 3 dull knocks, steady, patient, echoing my stolen heartbeat. The glacier hadn't let me go. It had let me out. I don't remember how long I walked, hours, maybe days. The Arctic erases time. Light never changes, shadows never shorten, the wind never stops. Every direction looked the same, and yet I kept moving, because the alternative was lying down and letting the glacier reclaim me. My pack was gone, my instruments useless. I carried only the empty flare gun and the rhythm in my chest, 3 knocks beating steady against bone. Sometimes I thought I heard the hum of an engine, the chop of rotor blades, the promise of rescue. I shouted until my throat bled, only to hear my own voice echo back, delayed, wrong. Sometimes louder, sometimes softer, but always there, as if the glacier itself were mocking me with my own hope. The horizon rippled. Once I swore I saw the lights of a settlement, warm, golden, promising safety. I ran toward them, stumbling, crying, until the lights bent and folded, resolving into the aurora shimmering across the sky. No cabins, no people, just me and the endless ice. I collapsed to my knees, chest hammering, the 3 knocks now louder than my pulse. I pressed my palm against my sternum as though I could force the rhythm to stop, but it beat on, relentless. That was when I noticed the snow around me. It shifted. Not from wind, not from my steps. It was rising, forming small ridges, concentric circles radiating outward from where I knelt. The same pattern I had seen from the air, from the fissures, from the cavern below. The circle was never in the ice. It was in me. I laughed then, not bitter, not broken, simply because I understood. The glacier had never needed to trap me. It only needed me to carry it. A vessel, a messenger. The knocking quieted, replaced by whispers threading through my skull, softer now, almost affectionate. Promises of rest, of belonging, of answers too vast for words. And for one terrifying moment, I wanted to listen. But then I looked up at the sky, the aurora shifting like green fire, and remembered why I came here. For patterns, for truth, for the stubborn human need to know. If I surrendered now, no one would ever hear what lay beneath the ice. My hand shook as I tore a page from my logbook, the last I had left. With frozen fingers, I scrawled everything. The faces, the glow, the voices, the cavern. I forced my hands steady, even as the letters curled, even as the script tried to change into theirs. I wrote until the page tore, until my hand bled. When I finished, I folded the page, tucked it into the flare gun's chamber, and fired it into the sky. The red streak burned across the twilight, higher, brighter than any signal I could have sent. For an instant, I thought I saw shapes in the aurora pause, faces turning toward the light. Then it vanished, swallowed by the night. Silence fell. The knocking stopped. I don't know if anyone will ever find that signal, or the page, or me. Maybe the wind will bury it in snow. Maybe the glacier will take it back. Maybe someone will see and understand. All I know is this. When I place my hand to my chest now, I feel nothing. No knock. No heartbeat. Just silence. But when I close my eyes, I still hear my voice whispering from somewhere deep below the ice. We are here. I've always believed that nature, in its rawest form, teaches you more than any classroom. I'm Alara Novak, wilderness survival instructor and environmental scientist, and I came to this corner of the Carpathian Mountains to study a fungal anomaly that has defied every ecological pattern I've ever learned. Alone, far from any trail or village. I told myself it was about the data, about the patterns, about understanding. But deep down, I knew it was also about testing myself, pushing the boundaries of what I could endure. The forest that greeted me was both breathtaking and unnerving. Towering spruce and fir trees loomed like silent sentinels, their thick, dark trunks soaked with a perpetual dampness. Moss clung to everything, rocks, roots, fallen logs, so thickly that the forest floor seemed cushioned in an almost unnatural green velvet. A faint mist hung low, curling around the trunks like ghostly fingers. The air was sharp, crisp, and bitterly cold, even for late summer. It carried the scent of decayed leaves, resin, and something else I couldn't immediately place, sweet, almost metallic, a hint that the ecosystem itself was off. I set up my small research camp near a shallow stream, its water running icy and clear over jagged stones. My boots sank slightly into the moss as I walked, leaving muted impressions, though occasionally I'd glance back and wonder if something or someone was following my tracks. There was a silence here that weighed on you, a quiet so complete it made my own heartbeat seem deafening. Birds called sporadically, their cries distorted as though echoing off invisible walls. Every sound felt exaggerated, yet muted at the same time, like impossible to place. The first anomaly presented itself almost immediately. I had noticed patches of the fungus growing faster than natural laws would allow, bright luminescent threads creeping across moss and bark. By midday, one patch had sprouted thin, almost translucent filaments in shapes that seemed vaguely humanoid. I knelt closer, fascinated, my breath fogging the air. A faint rustle made me jerk back, but when I looked, there was nothing. Just the mist, drifting between the trunks. My rational mind told me it was wind or a bird. Still, a prickle ran down my spine. By evening, the fog had thickened to the point where visibility was barely 10 feet. The stream's trickle became muffled under the weight of silence, and the forest seemed to close in on itself. I lit a small fire, the smoke curling in unusual patterns, almost like it was resisting the pull of the air. My equipment, calibrated and precise, began acting strangely. The GPS beeped erratically, then died. My compass spun, stubbornly refusing north. I shook it, thinking it might be a magnetic anomaly. There are strange mineral deposits here, but something in my gut told me it wasn't natural. I tried to focus on my work, mapping the fungus, taking samples, recording every detail in my journal. But even as I wrote, I noticed subtle disturbances in my surroundings. Small twigs snapped, but not beneath my boots. Shadows shifted in ways the fog shouldn't allow. Once, I glimpsed movement at the edge of my vision, an impossible flicker that resembled the outline of a figure, tall and thin, yet not human. When I turned my head, there was nothing. Sleep came reluctantly. I wrapped myself tightly in my sleeping bag, convinced that the cold would numb the nerves jittering through me. I left my flashlight on, angled toward the tent flap. Outside, I swore I heard something dragging across the moss, slow, deliberate, and impossibly light. The sound circled my tent, paused, and then vanished. My rational mind clutched at explanations. A fox, a deer. But my survival instincts, honed over years in harsher conditions, screamed that this was neither. I woke to the faint smell of decay, stronger now, with a metallic tang that made my stomach tighten. The forest had changed overnight. The fog was thicker, curling like smoke around every tree, and the patches of fungus had multiplied exponentially. Some strands now reached up toward the sky like skeletal fingers, swaying gently, almost in rhythm with an invisible current. I noted it meticulously in my journal, my hands trembling despite gloves. Then I saw the first real evidence of something. Intelligent. Footprints, impossibly large, the shape ambiguous, almost humanoid but with extra digits, trailing from the stream into the trees. They weren't random. They looped back on themselves, a deliberate pattern as if guiding me somewhere or warning me off. I followed the tracks cautiously, not out of curiosity, but necessity. My work depended on mapping this anomaly, understanding its limits. But the deeper I went, the more oppressive the forest became. Sounds of life, birds, small mammals, vanished. Branches overhead seemed to bend toward me, though there was no wind. Every step felt observed. My pulse quickened, a rhythmic drum matching the unease crawling over my skin. Then I saw it, a tree, old and gnarled, with fungus wrapping around it in shapes that mimicked human limbs. At first, I thought it was another tree root. Then it moved, just a twitch, barely perceptible, yet undeniably alive. I froze. The air grew colder, denser, heavy with the scent of decay. Something out there was watching, calculating, waiting. I reminded myself, I am a survivalist. I have faced storms, avalanches, wild predators. This is different, yes, but the rules are the same. Observe, adapt, survive. I scanned the fog, the trees, the ground. Every instinct screamed that I was being tested, probed by something that wasn't merely alive, but cunning. Night fell again, faster than I expected, and the temperature plummeted. I returned to camp, but the path I had marked now seemed subtly altered. Branches were broken, moss disturbed in patterns that didn't exist before. Something had moved through while I was away. I didn't feel relief. I felt challenged. My hands shook as I secured my tent, checking my knife, the fire, my traps. Then I heard it, soft, deliberate footsteps circling the perimeter of my camp, stopping whenever I paused. A low, wet sound, like breathing mixed with the rustle of leaves, rippled through the fog. I whispered into the night, testing my voice. Nothing answered. Then, a flicker of motion caught my eye. One of the fungal tendrils from a nearby patch quivered, leaning slightly toward me. My pulse spiked, and I realized I was staring at something that wasn't just imitating life. It was life, bending toward me with intent. I gripped my knife tighter, telling myself that tonight would be about observation, survival, and patience. This forest is old. Its creatures are patient. And so am I, or at least, I hope I am. Somewhere out there in the dense, suffocating fog of the Carpathian wilds, something was learning me as much as I was learning it. I didn't sleep again that night. Every snap of a twig, every whisper of wind through the spruce needles set my nerves taut. My fire had burned low, its embers sputtering under the dense fog. I wrapped myself tighter in my sleeping bag, knife clutched loosely in one hand, eyes flicking toward the faint glow of the fungal patches outside. They pulsed faintly in the darkness, like veins in some enormous, slumbering organism. Part of me wanted to examine them, scientific curiosity after all, but instinct screamed that proximity would be dangerous. By dawn, exhaustion had dulled my body, but sharpened my awareness. The footprints from the previous day were gone, replaced by a pattern I couldn't decipher. They wound around the trees in arcs too precise to be random, intersecting in ways that made no ecological sense. Something had been here while I slept, or perhaps it never left. My stomach nodded at the thought. I decided to investigate, cautiously. Moving slowly through the fog, I noticed subtle disturbances. The moss underfoot slightly compressed, then relaxed, a thin trail of condensation leading up to a tree as if some creature had brushed against it, a faint, sticky residue clinging to bark that shimmered in the morning light. I took samples, noting everything. My training forced me to catalog, to measure, to understand. Yet as I did, I felt eyes, hundreds, maybe thousands of unseen points, tracking my every movement. And then I saw it. At first, I thought it was a tree stump, twisted by rot. But as I approached, the shape shifted subtly, like a mirage in heat. Branches elongated, bark melted into sinew, and a head, or something like a head, turned toward me. Its form was fluid, unnatural, yet its gaze was unmistakable, intelligent, calculating. My heart slammed, but I forced myself to breathe slowly. Panicking now would be fatal. I scanned the environment for leverage, for any advantage. It didn't move closer, not yet. It simply observed, blending with the fungus and the trees, mimicking the environment perfectly. I realized then that its intelligence wasn't just predatory. It was adaptive. It was learning me, learning my instincts. The forest itself was its weapon, and I was being taught the rules too late. I retreated cautiously, careful not to make sudden movements. Every step seemed to echo unnaturally, yet my ears told me no one else was there. The fog thickened, curling around me like fingers, obscuring distance and depth. I remembered my training. Remain aware of spatial cues, mark your path, create barriers. I tied a few strips of cloth along trees, both to track my movements and as makeshift alarms. By midday, the air was heavier, warmer in an unnatural way. The fungal patches had multiplied again, sprouting tendrils that crept along the ground toward my campsite. I realized they weren't random growths. They were stalking me, sensing my location. Panic surged, but I grounded myself. Panic was the predator's ally. Logic was mine. I constructed a circle of broken branches around my tent, not to trap anything, but to give me a moment's warning. Hours passed. The fog shifted continuously, patterns forming that my brain instinctively tried to map. Shapes appeared in the mist, familiar silhouettes that vanished when focused on. I began hearing whispers, soft and guttural, a sibilant mimicry of my own voice. My pulse raced. The forest was no longer just silent. It was communicating, probing, testing the limits of my perception. Then I made a mistake. I stepped off the marked path to investigate a cluster of luminous fungus, leaning closer to get a better look. The moment my boots pressed the moss, the forest responded. Branches snapped behind me. A low, wet hiss rolled through the fog. I spun around and caught movement. A form, taller than any human, bending and stretching like it was made of the shadows themselves. Its skin shimmered with a wet luminescence, matching the fungus, yet I could see eyes, bright, predatory, and impossible to look away from. I ran, not blindly, but strategically, calculating routes, scanning for obstacles, slipping along mossy ground to avoid noise. It followed, not at a sprint, but with a slow, deliberate patience that made my blood run cold. I realized it was toying with me, shaping the environment, guiding my movements, hurting me. I had been a student, and suddenly I was prey. I ducked behind a fallen log, straining to hear. The hiss had stopped. My chest burned, sweat mixing with the icy dampness of the fog. Every instinct screamed that the creature was close, closer than I wanted to admit. And then a sound that nearly froze me. A mimic of my own voice, low and trembling, drifting from somewhere deeper in the forest. Alara. I swallowed, forcing myself to respond aloud. I'm here. My voice felt ridiculous, fragile, but I needed to confirm my presence, my humanity. Silence. And then the rustle, the wet brush of something moving along the moss, circling me like a predator inspecting its options. I realized I had underestimated it. This wasn't just a creature of instinct. It was cunning, patient, capable of strategy. My training in survival, in reading terrain, in tracking and camouflage, was being tested against intelligence I couldn't yet comprehend. Every decision I made now could be fatal. I retreated toward my camp, taking care to step only where I had pre-marked my path. The fog thinned slightly, revealing the glimmer of embers from the fire I had left smoldering. Relief surged for a moment. Then horror followed. My circle of sticks and branches had been disturbed. Some lay broken, others bent toward the tent, pointing like fingers. And there, just beyond the perimeter, the fungus pulsed rhythmically as if breathing. My breath caught. It was waiting. Watching. I grabbed my knife and flashlight, circling the tent slowly. Nothing moved. Nothing reacted immediately. Yet I knew that it had not left. It had adapted to my alarms, learned their purpose. Every rustle of leaves, every shadow in the fog was a calculated variable in a game I hadn't chosen to play but couldn't escape. Hours passed. I stayed awake, alternately observing and cataloging, unable to close my eyes. My body screamed for rest, but my mind was a sharpened blade, too aware of the unnatural intelligence stalking me. Occasionally, I glimpsed movement. An impossibly tall, thin figure, always partially hidden, mimicking trees, moss, even the luminous fungus. I started to notice subtle patterns. When it approached, the fog thickened. When it withdrew, the mist thinned. It was learning, adapting, testing me as much as I studied it. By the time night fell again, I understood one undeniable truth. This forest was no longer a passive environment. It had become a predator's domain, and I was the anomaly, the unexpected factor. Survival would require more than training. It would require intuition, improvisation, and the willingness to break every rule I had learned about patience and observation. I was about to learn just how far I could push both. By the third night, exhaustion had begun to gnaw at me in a way that made focus difficult. Every muscle ached. Every thought felt sluggish. Yet I knew that hesitation could be fatal. The fog had thickened again, curling into the spaces between trees like living smoke, and the forest seemed to pulse with an awareness I couldn't ignore. The fungus had spread in ways that made no ecological sense. Some patches now hung from branches like lanterns, others climbed rocks and roots in spirals, as if forming an elaborate maze designed to mislead me. I didn't leave the tent. I couldn't. I tried to stay quiet, to let it approach, but not too close. I experimented. I would shift slightly, observe its reaction. Every time the tendrils of fungus twitched toward me, the fog thickened in the direction I was moving, and the rustle of unseen movement grew louder. I was no longer tracking it. It was tracking me. It was learning my routines, predicting my path. I realized then that it had patience far beyond any animal I had studied. It could wait indefinitely, and I would eventually make a mistake. And I did. I thought I saw a glimmer, just a faint reflection on the stream, a flash that might have been my imagination. Impulsively, I stepped out, flashlight cutting a narrow beam through the fog. The reflection moved. No, not a reflection, something shifting beneath the water's surface, something that shouldn't exist. My breath hitched. Then it appeared fully, and I nearly dropped the flashlight. It was taller than any human, yet unnaturally thin, limbs elongated and bending in ways that made my stomach twist. Its skin was mottled with fungus and moss, blending perfectly with the forest. Its head, if I could call it that, tilted, observing, calculating. It wasn't aggressive, not yet. It was studying me as though weighing its options. I backed away slowly, keeping my flashlight on it. Every step was careful, measured, but the uneven forest floor betrayed me. My boot caught a root, snapping it sharply. The sound echoed through the fog. The creature reacted instantly. Tendrils of fungus along its limbs quivered, and it moved with fluid precision, closing distance faster than anything I expected. My mind raced. Escape seemed unlikely. I had to improvise. I remembered my survival training. Use the environment, the moss, the fog, the uneven terrain. They were tools if I could think fast enough. I ducked behind a fallen log, shoving soil and branches toward it, trying to obscure my scent. The creature hesitated, then slithered forward, limbs and fungal extensions spreading over the ground, mimicking the moss. My heart slammed. I realized it was using camouflage like I would use a tarp or foliage. It wasn't just hiding, it was hunting strategically. I had to distract it. I grabbed my fire-starting kit, igniting a small flare and tossing it into a nearby clearing. The light flared and fizzled, and I heard the rustle of movement as it approached the flare instead of me. I exhaled sharply. That gave me a few moments, enough to retreat further into the fog, deeper into a narrow ravine where the fungus hadn't yet spread. But the relief was temporary. The fog distorted my perception of distance. Every step forward felt like going in circles. Branches seemed to twitch and lean as if guiding me toward traps. My flashlight flickered, and I realized with a sinking heart that its intelligence extended to manipulating my senses. It knew where I was, even if I couldn't see it. I paused, trying to listen, trying to detect any subtle cues. That's when I noticed a sound I had overlooked, a faint rhythmic tapping, like claws against wood. It wasn't the creature moving, it was something it had left behind. Fungus tendrils, perhaps, or pieces of bark arranged in patterns. I realized it had been setting markers, herding me along an invisible path. Desperation clawed at me. I needed a plan, and I needed it fast. Using what little light I had, I examined the terrain. The ravine had a steep incline at the far end that's barely navigable. I could use it to my advantage. If I could force it up the slope, it might overextend itself. But to do that, I had to bait it. I lit another flare and lobbed it down the slope. The fog glowed briefly as the flare landed. The creature reacted immediately, moving toward the light. My pulse hammered in my ears as I sprinted in the opposite direction, heart racing, muscles burning. The ground was treacherous, roots and rocks threatening to trip me at every step. But I had to keep moving. Every instinct screamed that stopping meant death or something worse. I reached the base of the incline and scrambled upward, clinging to roots and rocks. The creature followed, slow but unrelenting, its fungal limbs stretched unnaturally, gripping the slope with impossible strength. I could feel it, hear it behind me, a low, wet hiss vibrating through the fog. My legs screamed in protest, but I forced myself higher. The incline ended at a narrow ridge, barely wide enough for me to stand, but it gave me leverage. I reached for a fallen branch, heavier than I expected. The creature approached, tilting its head, assessing me again. I swung the branch, striking the nearest fungal limb. It recoiled briefly, the sound like wet tearing, then advanced again. I backed toward the ridge's edge, knife in hand, ready to leap if necessary. And then it paused. For a moment, I thought I had won, but the pause felt deliberate, strategic, like a predator calculating its next move. It emitted a low, guttural hum, a sound that resonated through the fog and the ground. My chest tightened. Whatever it wasn't just a creature. It was orchestrating the environment, turning the forest itself against me. I had one chance. I leapt toward the ridge, rolling as I landed, using momentum to place myself behind a cluster of rocks. The creature lunged, fungal limbs stretching, grasping, but I had already disappeared into the mist. The last thing I saw before the fog swallowed it was the faint shimmer of luminescence along its back, pulsing like a heartbeat. I ran blindly through the forest, branches slapping my face, mud and moss caking my boots. Every nerve screamed that it was still following, still watching. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time lost meaning in the fog. Eventually, I stumbled onto a narrow path that led downward, away from the ravine. Exhaustion and adrenaline drove me forward. Finally, at dawn, I broke from the dense forest into a small clearing. The fog had lifted slightly. I paused, breathing ragged, and looked back. The forest stood silent, the fungal growths pulsing faintly in the morning light, no sign of the creature. My body shook, mind racing. I was alive, but I knew better than to believe it had left. I gathered my strength and continued. I had no choice but to leave the forest, to retreat to civilization, to report what I had seen. But as I looked back one last time, I saw it, just at the edge of the tree line, a shadow among shadows. Watching, waiting, and I knew without a doubt that this was far from over. The Carpathian forest had claimed its story, and I had become a part of it. I never thought I'd feel relief in the Carpathian Mountains, but when I stumbled onto the dirt road that led out of that cursed forest, I allowed myself a shallow breath. The fog had lifted almost entirely, and the first rays of sunlight broke through the peaks, painting the clearing in gold. For a fleeting moment, the forest seemed inert, almost beautiful. I clutched my knife, still slick with sweat and grime, and surveyed the tree line. Nothing moved. Perhaps it was over. Perhaps I had survived. But survival had changed me. My mind churned with fragments of memory, the pulsing fungus, the impossible shape that mimicked trees and moss, the low hum that vibrated through the soil. I tried to catalog it scientifically, tried to reduce the terror to data I could process, but logic felt brittle, inadequate. Something in that forest had intelligence, strategy, patience, and now it existed in my memory in ways I couldn't fully control. The road was deserted, as expected. Villagers rarely ventured this far. I stumbled along, heart still hammering, boots soaked in mud and moss, hands trembling. Every sound from the surrounding slopes, rustling leaves, distant bird calls, a sudden snap of a branch, made me flinch. I forced myself to walk with measured steps, scanning for anything that didn't belong, anything that might hint that it had followed me. Rational thought told me the creature hadn't left the forest. Survival instinct whispered otherwise. By midday, I reached a small, abandoned ranger's cabin. Dust and decay filled the air, but it offered shelter. I locked the door and sank to the floor, leaning against the wall. My hands shook as I cleaned my knife and gear. The silence of the cabin was deafening after the constant pressure of the forest, and for the first time, I allowed myself to feel the sheer weight of exhaustion. My body ached in every joint. My muscles trembled, and my mind felt like it had been run through some invisible gauntlet. I tried to sleep, but even in the isolation of the cabin, I couldn't escape the forest entirely. In dreams, the fog returned, the tendrils of fungus twisting toward me, forming humanoid shapes that whispered my name. I woke repeatedly, drenched in sweat, convinced I had heard movement outside the cabin. Each time, rational thought reassured me nothing could have followed. And yet, the fear persisted. The impression of eyes watching from just beyond perception refused to fade. Over the next few days, I began to document everything in meticulous detail. Every anomalous growth, every sound, every observation I had made in the forest. I tried to map its behavior, its intelligence, its adaptive strategies. But the more I wrote, the more I realized something crucial. I had underestimated it. The fungus itself was part of the creature, part of its strategy. It manipulated the environment, controlled perception, guided my movements, tested me in ways that no human could anticipate. On the fourth night after leaving the forest, I awoke to a sound that froze my blood. A faint tapping at the cabin window. Slow, deliberate. My heart raced. I forced myself to look, to see rationally, but the glass reflected only my own wide-eyed face. And yet I couldn't shake the certainty that something was there. Something intelligent, patient, waiting. It wasn't the forest this time. It had followed me, or at least it had sent a piece of itself. I didn't open the door. I didn't investigate. I sat in the corner, knife in hand, flashlight casting a narrow beam across the dusty floor. Every instinct screamed that this presence was studying me, learning, adapting. I felt a shiver that had nothing to do with cold. The creature, whatever it truly was, had extended its domain beyond the forest. Its patience was not bound by distance. I realized then that I had survived the forest, but I hadn't escaped it. The anomaly, the predator, the intelligence I had glimpsed, it wasn't constrained by geography or time. It had waited, had observed, had learned. And now it lingered in my mind, in my awareness, in the shadows of my life. In the following weeks, I returned home, tried to reintegrate into the world of research, of human interaction. Friends, colleagues, even family noticed a change. I moved more cautiously, slept lightly, spoke less. My notebooks overflowed with observations, sketches, calculations, but always with gaps where fear had paralyzed me. Sometimes I would glance at the edge of my vision and see movement, flickers of shape that vanished when directly observed. I tried to rationalize it, of course. Stress, exhaustion, the mind's natural tendency to misinterpret stimuli. But deep down, I knew better. The fungus, the predator, they were still out there, waiting, adapting. And I was the one who had intruded. One evening, as I reviewed my notes, I noticed something strange. A faint, pulsing pattern in one of the fungus sketches that resembled an arrow pointing downward into the soil. It hadn't been there before. I hadn't drawn it. My pulse quickened. The memory of the forest's rhythm returned. The soundless movements, the low, wet hiss, the way the fog had conspired to mislead me. Could it be that even here, miles away, its influence persisted? I can't say. What I do know is this. The Carpathian Forest has a story, and part of that story now lives within me. The fungus, the intelligence, the predator, it hasn't ended. It waits, hidden, patient, watching. I survive for now, but the knowledge gnaws at me. I understand too much, and yet I cannot fully comprehend. And sometimes when the wind shifts just right, carrying the faint scent of decay and resin, I swear I hear it, the soft rustle of tendrils brushing the ground just beyond my vision. And I know, without doubt, that it is still learning, still waiting, still hunting. I will never return to that forest, not willingly. And yet, part of me knows that survival is not a victory. It is merely the next chapter in a story I cannot escape. The forest endures. So does it. And so does the knowledge that somewhere in the shadows, something watches. My name is Eric Jansen. A 38-year-old former Dutch Special Forces operative turned private security contractor. For most of my adult life, I've lived on the edge of war zones: Afghanistan, Syria, the Horn of Africa, places where discipline, endurance, and calculated violence kept me alive. I left that life 2 years ago, trying to ease into something quieter, but the skills I carried refused to fade. When an old contact from the UN asked me to accompany a small research team into northern Alaska as their security escort, I agreed. It sounded simple. Watch over scientists as they took samples from a decommissioned research station deep in the Brooks Range, document the condition of the site, and fly out in a week. I thought it would be a week of cold wind and boredom. I was wrong. The station was nothing more than a scattering of prefabricated metal huts built decades ago, abandoned after funding dried up. The team, 3 biologists and 1 climatologist, were there to gather soil cores and atmospheric data, chasing patterns of permafrost melt. My role was to keep them safe from bears, wolves, or whatever else might stalk us this far north. I was comfortable with that responsibility. I knew predators, and predators I could handle. But even as we landed, I noticed the silence. Usually wilderness sings with something: wind hissing through trees, birds shrieking, the distant trickle of meltwater. Here the tundra was mute. The air carried no bird song, no rustle, only the faint groan of shifting ice. The others brushed it off, but my instincts sharpened. Silence can be louder than sound when you've lived long enough in places where danger waits for you to blink. The cold wrapped around me immediately, biting into my skin despite layers of insulated gear. The wind smelled faintly metallic, like blood on steel. The sky hung low with gray clouds, bruised purple on the edges. I carried my rifle across my chest, not because I expected trouble, but because something in my gut said to keep it close. The first 2 days were uneventful. The scientists set up their equipment, and I patrolled the perimeter. The tundra stretched endless in every direction, a white-brown wasteland broken only by jagged black rock and the skeletal ribs of old equipment half buried in ice. Yet I kept noticing odd things. Footprints in the snow that didn't belong to us, shapes too elongated, too uneven for wolf or bear. The prints weren't fresh, but neither were they eroded enough to be months old. Something had been moving around here recently. On the 3rd evening, while the others cataloged samples in the mess hut, I walked past the storage shed and froze. The shed door, which I had bolted earlier, now hung slightly open, creaking as the wind teased it. I raised my rifle, swept the beam of my flashlight inside. Empty, just boxes of supplies stacked neatly. Still, the lock was snapped clean in 2, not forced, not cut, snapped. I said nothing to the team. No sense in panicking them. But that night I sat awake with the rifle across my lap, listening. The wind gusted and moaned, but underneath it, I swore I heard something else. A low hum, deep and resonant, like a voice muffled beneath ice. By morning, the climatologist, Dr. Vega, complained that his instruments had been tampered with. He swore the calibration settings had changed overnight. I checked for footprints, for signs of intrusion, but the snow was clean around his equipment. My own nerves were starting to fray. I wasn't afraid of combat. I wasn't afraid of wild predators. But this was different. This was unseen, unexplainable, and I didn't like that it played with us while staying hidden. That evening, I convinced the scientists to stay inside the main hut while I checked the perimeter again. I pushed farther out this time toward a ridge of rock that jutted up like a broken spine. Snow crunched beneath my boots, each step swallowed by the vast emptiness. I found the tracks again, fresher this time. 5 toes, long, splayed, sinking deep as though whatever made them weighed more than a man. My chest tightened. The stride length was unnerving, 2 meters between steps. Whatever it was, it moved with deliberate, unnatural control. At the base of the ridge, I noticed something etched into the rock. Carvings, worn but unmistakable. Spirals, concentric circles, crude shapes of figures bending backward, mouths agape. The markings weren't from modern hands. They looked older than the station and older than memory. A sound drifted down from above, a slow, scraping noise like claws dragging over stone. I should have pulled back, should have returned to the hut, but instinct rooted me in place. I raised my rifle and waited. The scraping stopped. The silence that followed was unbearable, pressing against my eardrums until I thought they would burst. Finally, I retreated, every nerve in my body screaming that watched me from that ridge. That night, the hum returned, louder now, resonating through the walls of the hut, setting the metal frame vibrating. The scientists heard it too. They huddled together, whispering theories. Seismic shifts, wind resonance, maybe the ice itself. But I could see in their faces they didn't believe their own words. I did not sleep. I sat by the window, watching the dark. At some point I saw movement. Just a shadow against the horizon, taller than a man, gliding slowly across the snow without sinking. The shape paused, as if it knew I was watching, then melted back into the night. Fear is a strange thing for someone like me. In firefights, I never felt it the way civilians do. Training turns fear into focus, but this was different. My training had no category for a thing that left impossible footprints, hummed like a buried voice, and moved across snow without leaving weight behind. I told myself the same thing I always had: adapt, observe, act when necessary. But as the days bled together, the sense grew that we weren't merely being stalked, we were being tested. On the fifth morning, Dr. Vega was gone. His parka and boots were missing from the rack, his bunk empty. No one had heard him leave. We found his trail outside, footprints heading toward the ridge. Only his footprints. No sign of a struggle, no other tracks. Just his steady march into the wilderness until the wind swallowed the path. The others wanted to search. I forbade it. I've led recovery missions before. A man walking alone in this terrain doesn't last long, but part of me knew it wasn't the cold that claimed him. He had answered something. That night, as we argued about what to do, the hum rose again, this time carrying words. I couldn't understand them, but they coiled inside my skull, tugging at thoughts I didn't want to remember. One of the biologists, a young woman named Kara, covered her ears and screamed that it was calling her name. I pressed the barrel of my rifle against my temple, reminding myself that steel was real, that action was real, that I could still choose. Because whatever moved beneath that ridge, it wanted us to forget we had choices, and I was not ready to give it that satisfaction. The next morning, the camp felt different. It wasn't just the absence of Dr. Vega. It was the silence that followed him. Even the wind seemed to hold back, as though the world itself was listening. Kara hadn't slept. Her eyes were rimmed red, darting to every shadow like an animal expecting a predator. The two remaining biologists spoke in clipped whispers, clinging to rational explanations. I knew the truth, though. Their logic was armor that was already cracking. I brewed strong black coffee on the rusting stove, the bitter smell cutting through the cold air. My hands trembled only slightly as I lifted the cup. I kept my rifle within reach, resting across my knees. Sleep deprivation was sinking its claws into me, but fear kept me sharp. Fear kept me alive. Around noon, I decided we had to check the ridge. Not to find Dr. Vega, I knew that was hopeless, but to confirm what had lured him. The others hesitated, but I pulled rank. I wasn't their commander, not anymore, but years of combat leadership had carved authority into my voice. They obeyed, or at least followed reluctantly. The snow crunched beneath our boots as we approached the ridge. The footprints we had seen yesterday were half gone, blurred by wind, yet Vega's trail remained clear. A straight line into the rock wall, as if he had walked with purpose. My breath fogged the air in front of me, and with every inhale, the metallic tang seemed stronger, like iron shavings in my lungs. When we reached the ridge, the carvings I had found before looked sharper, more defined, as though the ice had melted just enough to reveal deeper lines. Spirals interlocked with human forms bent backward, their limbs contorted at impossible angles. Kara gagged when she saw them. One of the others muttered that the figures looked like they were kneeling. I climbed closer, scanning for tracks. That was when I noticed the snow disturbed high on the ridge, far higher than any of us could reach without climbing gear. Long, shallow gouges scarred the rock, like something had dragged itself along the face. I raised my rifle, sighted along the ridge. Nothing moved, but the hairs on my neck prickled as though unseen eyes studied me. We didn't linger. I ordered everyone back, and this time no one argued. That night, the hum returned, louder, clearer, almost articulate. Kara pressed her palms to her ears, rocking back and forth. "It knows my name," she whispered over and over. I tried to ground her, gripping her shoulders, forcing her to look at me. Her pupils were dilated, her breath shallow. I recognized the look. It was the same expression I had seen on young soldiers before their first firefight, the moment they realized training could not shield them from what waited. "We hold together," I told them, my voice steady. "Whatever this is, it wants us afraid. We don't give it that satisfaction." But even as I said it, doubt gnawed at me. Fear wasn't just a weakness. It was fuel for something intelligent enough to use it. I set a watch rotation that night. I took first shift by the window, staring out into the frozen dark. Hours passed with nothing but the groan of shifting ice. But near dawn, I caught movement again. A figure, tall, impossibly tall, gliding just beyond the perimeter. Its outline was wrong, limbs too long, bending in ways that mocked the human form. I blinked once, and it was gone. When Kara relieved me, I didn't tell her what I'd seen. I wasn't sure she could survive hearing it. By morning, the second biologist was gone. His parka was missing, his boots as well. No sign of struggle, no noise in the night. Just gone, like Vega. The third scientist snapped. He accused Kara of letting them out, of conspiring somehow. They screamed at each other until I slammed my rifle butt against the floor, silencing them. My patience was unraveling. Discipline was the only thing holding this fragile group together, and discipline was mine to enforce. I checked outside again. The snow told the story. One set of footprints leading away, just like Vega's. Steady, willing. But there was something new this time. Alongside the human tracks were faint impressions. Not boots, not paws. Long, deep lines as though something thin and massive had slithered parallel to him, invisible in the night. I stared at those tracks until my teeth ground together. Whatever intelligence lurked here wasn't just luring them, it was escorting them. That realization shook me more than anything else. Back inside, I secured the hut as best I could. Bolted doors, reinforced windows, weapons within reach. Kara sat in the corner muttering prayers in Dutch, words I hadn't heard since my childhood. The last scientist, his name was Roland, paced in circles, mumbling equations under his breath like math could protect him. I envied their illusions. That night, the hum became a chorus. Multiple voices, layered, rising and falling like a tide. The walls vibrated, the floor shook, my rifle trembled in my hands as though it wanted to leap free. And then, beneath the voices, came something worse. The sound of knocking, slow, deliberate, from beneath the floorboards. I froze. The others screamed. The knocking traveled, moving from one corner to another, like something enormous circled beneath us. Then, silence. Roland broke first. He lunged for the door, screaming that he had to get out, that it was safer outside. I tackled him, slammed him into the ground, restrained him with every ounce of muscle I had left. He clawed at me, eyes wild, spittle flying. "It's waiting for me, it promised!" I held him down until his body went limp with exhaustion. But the damage was done. I had felt it too, the pull, the whisper in my bones that said leaving wasn't death, but completion. When dawn came, Roland was gone. I hadn't slept. Neither had Kara. We sat across from each other, both of us hollow-eyed, staring at the empty bunk. Only two of us left now. My chest ached with the knowledge that it wouldn't stop. It wouldn't stop until it had both of us. That day I made a choice. No more waiting. No more hiding. I told Kara we would leave at first light, hike south until the sat phone regained signal, call for extraction. She clung to the plan like a lifeline. But in her eyes, I saw the same thing I felt. Doubt. Night fell, and with it, the voices returned. This time, they spoke in unison, one word pulsing through the air, again and again. I didn't recognize the language, but Kara did. Her face drained of blood, lips trembling. "It's Dutch," she whispered. "It's saying kneel." The air grew heavy, pressing down until my knees buckled. Kara screamed, clutching her head. The pressure built until my vision blurred, black dots dancing across my eyes. With every ounce of will I had left, I forced myself upright, rifle raised, and then I saw it. Not a shadow this time, not a suggestion, but the thing itself, standing just beyond the glass. Taller than the hut, limbs elongated and jointed wrong, its body a silhouette that bent the very air around it. No face, only a gaping spiral where a head should have been, spinning slowly, drawing the eye deeper. Kara collapsed to her knees. My finger hovered on the trigger, but some primal part of me knew bullets would mean nothing. The thing didn't move closer. It didn't need to. It just stood there, waiting, the hum vibrating through my bones. It wasn't hunting us. It was inviting us. And I feared that sooner or later one of us would accept. I don't remember sleeping that night, but I must have drifted into something close to unconsciousness. When my eyes opened again, the pale blue light of morning seeped through the frosted window. My body felt heavy, as though something had pressed down on me for hours. Kara was still on the floor, curled into herself, lips moving silently. I stood, joints aching, and checked the perimeter. The world outside was empty, but the snow told a different story. Dozens of footprints circled the hut. Some looked human, but elongated, stretched as though the person had been pulled apart while still moving. Others were gouges, deep and smooth, like the marks of an enormous serpent. All of them converged toward the ridge. Kara wouldn't move. She just sat there staring at the door. I crouched beside her, speaking low, using the calm, controlled tone I had once used with panicked soldiers pinned under fire. We leave now. South, until we hit a signal. If we stay, it wins. Do you hear me? Her eyes flicked toward mine, wide and glassy. Finally, she nodded. We packed fast. Rifles, rations, emergency flares. The sat phone was useless without a signal, but I strapped it to my chest anyway. I forced the door open, scanning the horizon. Gray clouds smothered the sun, and the cold cut like knives against my face. The ridge loomed to the north, dark and jagged, and for a moment I thought I saw movement along its top. Something tall leaning forward, watching. We moved south. The snow crunched beneath our boots, each step an effort in the thin, brittle air. My lungs burned, and every breath tasted of iron. Kara stumbled, muttering to herself in Dutch. I kept her moving with a hand on her shoulder, but she felt fragile, like a child about to shatter. Hours passed. The land never changed, endless white, broken by black rock outcrops. I checked the GPS repeatedly, but the readings flickered, erratic, spinning as though the satellites couldn't find us. Then I heard it, a sound beneath the wind. Footsteps, but not ours. They echoed from behind us, slow and steady, each crunch of snow deliberate. I froze, raised my rifle, scanned the emptiness. Nothing, just the flat horizon. But the sound continued, closer now. We're being followed, I said. My voice sounded foreign, too calm for what I felt. Kara whimpered, covering her ears. It's not following, it's guiding. We pushed harder. The light dimmed as clouds thickened, shadows stretching across the tundra. My breath grew ragged, muscles screaming, but the sound behind us never faltered. Always the same pace, always the same distance. By dusk, Kara collapsed. Her legs buckled, and she sank into the snow. I pulled her up, but she shook her head, eyes wide with terror. It won't let us leave. Don't you see? The ridge is everywhere. We're walking in circles. I looked around, and my stomach dropped. She was right. Ahead of us, barely visible in the dim light, the ridge rose again. The same carvings, the same jagged spine. We had walked south all day, and yet the ridge still stood in front of us. No, I whispered. That's not possible. Kara laughed then, a high, broken sound. It's not the land that's moving, it's us. I dragged her to her feet anyway, forcing her forward. We reached the base of the ridge as night fell. The carvings glistened with frost, spirals and contorted figures clearer than ever, as though freshly cut. I pressed a gloved hand to the stone. The surface vibrated beneath my palm, faint but steady, like a heartbeat. Then the hum began again. Not from the distance this time, from the rock itself. Kara screamed, stumbling backward. The sound grew louder, resonating in my bones, rattling my teeth. I raised my rifle, aiming at the stone like a fool, and then I saw it, a fissure opening slowly in the rock, wide enough for a man to pass through. From within came darkness deeper than any night, and a smell like rotting earth mixed with ozone. Kara dropped to her knees, whispering in Dutch, rocking back and forth. Her words were prayer and surrender combined. I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed to turn and flee into the snow. But the footsteps behind us returned, louder now, heavier. I spun, weapon raised, and for the first time I saw it in full. The thing from the shadows. Its body towered above me, limbs jointed wrong, arms too long, dragging across the snow. Its head was a spiraling void, a hole that twisted the air around it, pulling my gaze deeper until I thought I would fall in. Its skin was pale, translucent, stretched over bones that jutted at impossible angles. And yet it moved with grace, with purpose, as though it had all the time in the world. Kara crawled toward it, weeping. "It called me," she whispered. "It wants me." "No." I grabbed her, dragging her back. My rifle roared, the crack shattering the air. The bullets struck its body, ripping through flesh. But there was no blood, no reaction. The holes closed as quickly as they opened, the flesh knitting back together like melting ice. The spiral in its head widened, spinning faster. The hum rose into a wail, a sound that pressed against my skull until I thought it would crack. Kara screamed, clutching her head, blood seeping from her ears. I fired again, screaming curses, but it was like throwing stones at the ocean. My mind frayed, thoughts slipping like sand through my fingers. Images flooded in, endless ice, kneeling figures, the ridge rising across centuries. It wasn't just a thing, it was a presence, ancient and patient, and we were insects in its web. I dragged Kara toward the fissure in the rock, not because I trusted it, but because the alternative was certain death, or worse. The air around the fissure pulsed, drawing us closer. My muscles shook, every step a battle against the pressure pushing down on me. Behind us, the creature advanced, its spiral head rotating, pulling everything toward it. Snow whipped upward, rocks groaned, the very air bent. Kara clawed at me, screaming to let her go, to let it take her. I held on anyway, teeth gritted, dragging her with the last of my strength. We reached the fissure. I shoved her inside, then followed, the darkness swallowing us whole. Inside, the sound cut off. Silence wrapped around us, heavy and suffocating. My flashlight flickered on, beams slicing through the dark. We stood in a tunnel carved into the rock, walls smooth and damp, spirals etched into every surface. The air was warm, humid, stinking of decay. Kara collapsed, sobbing. I pressed my back against the wall, rifle raised, listening. Nothing moved. Nothing hummed. But the silence was worse. It wasn't absence. It was waiting. For the first time since I'd arrived in Alaska, I felt true panic. Not the sharpened edge of combat fear, but the helpless terror of being a child in the dark, knowing something was about to touch you. And I realized then, the ridge hadn't been a boundary. It was a doorway. We had stepped through. The air inside the fissure was thick and wet, clinging to my lungs with every breath. My flashlight's beam cut through the dark, glistening off damp walls carved with spirals. Each spiral seemed to shift when I looked away, as though the rock itself twisted in slow motion. My boots crunched on grit, and the sound echoed unnaturally, carrying too far down the tunnel. Kara's sobs softened into whimpers. She sat slumped against the wall, hair plastered to her face with sweat. Her eyes were bloodshot, her lips moving in whispers I couldn't catch. The claustrophobia pressed in from all sides, the tunnel narrowing as if the mountain itself were swallowing us whole. I forced myself to move forward, rifle raised, each step deliberate. I needed to keep Kara alive, if only to keep myself sane. "On your feet," I told her, tone sharp, like I was back commanding soldiers. She blinked up at me, dazed, then slowly obeyed, leaning heavily on my arm. The deeper we went, the warmer it became. Steam rose from fissures in the rock, carrying a stench of rot and copper. My skin prickled with sweat under layers of cold-weather gear. The oppressive silence pressed against my eardrums until I could hear the blood rushing in my veins. Then the sound began again. Not the low hum from before, but a rhythm, a pulse. Slow, steady, like a heartbeat reverberating through the stone. Each thud rattled the floor beneath us, vibrating up through my legs. Kara shivered violently, whispering, "It's alive. The mountain's alive." I wanted to dismiss it, but part of me knew she was right. The tunnel widened into a chamber. My flashlight swept across walls coated in slick moss, spirals carved into every surface, overlapping, endless. In the center rose a structure that wasn't natural, a column of fused bone and stone, spiraling upward like a grotesque pillar. Embedded in its surface were skulls, human and animal alike, their hollow sockets staring into the dark. Kara dropped to her knees, covering her mouth to stifle a scream. I felt bile rise in my throat, but I swallowed it down, focusing on the rifle in my hands. Steel, weight, reality. This was how I survived, fixating on what I could control. As I circled the pillar, the heartbeat grew louder, syncing with my own until I couldn't tell which belonged to me. My vision blurred at the edges. For a moment, I swore I saw the skulls moving, jaws opening, teeth grinding, as though whispering secrets too faint to hear. Then Kara screamed. I spun, flashlight swinging. She was staring at the tunnel we had come through. A shape stood in the entrance, silhouetted by darkness deeper than shadow. The creature, it had followed us inside. Its spiral head rotated slowly, drawing the air toward it. The chamber groaned as if the entire mountain bent to its will. Dust rained from above, cracks splintering across the ceiling. Kara scrambled backward, pressing against the pillar, her sobs echoing like a child's. I leveled my rifle and fired. The shots thundered in the enclosed space, deafening, the flash lighting up the chamber. Bullets tore into its body. But as before, the wounds closed instantly, flesh knitting like liquid. The creature didn't flinch. It stepped forward, limbs bending wrong, joints snapping like breaking branches. The spiral widened, pulling harder, tugging at my body like gravity itself had shifted. My boots skidded across the floor as I fought to stay upright. "Kara, run!" I roared, though I knew there was nowhere to go. She clung to the pillar, screaming as the pull dragged her fingers loose one by one. I dropped to my stomach, dug my free hand into the grit, anchoring myself. My mind raced. Firearms were useless. The pillar, the spirals, this was connected. If the thing was using the structure, maybe I could break it. I aimed at the base of the pillar and fired. Stone and bone exploded in shards, fragments raining across the chamber. The heartbeat faltered, stuttering in its rhythm. The creature staggered, spiral shuddering. Kara fell to the ground, coughing, the pull easing slightly. Hope surged through me. I reloaded, teeth gritted, and unleashed round after round into the pillar. Chunks of bone cracked, skulls shattering. The sound that erupted was not a hum, not a voice, but a scream. High and metallic, reverberating through the stone until my skull felt like it would split. The creature convulsed, limbs twitching, spiral stuttering as though glitching between existence and nothingness. Its form blurred, edges flickering. Kara crawled to me, clutching my sleeve. "It's not dying," she sobbed. "You can't kill it. You can only wake it." And as she said it, I realized she was right. The pillar wasn't a prison. It was a beacon. My destruction wasn't weakening it. I was feeding it. The spiral steadied, widening again, brighter now, like a vortex pulling in light itself. Shadows bent toward it, twisting, elongating. Kara shrieked as her body lifted from the ground, dragged inch by inch toward the void. I grabbed her wrist, muscles screaming as I pulled against the force. My boots skidded, grit tearing my gloves. Her body lifted higher, hair whipping around her face. Her eyes met mine, wide with terror and resignation. "Let me go," she cried. "It wants me. If I go, maybe you live." "Shut up," I roared, pulling harder, veins straining in my neck. I had lost too many people in war zones, too many comrades swallowed by things I couldn't control. I would not lose her too, but the spiral's pull intensified. My arms burned, tendons threatening to snap. Her fingers slipped, one by one, until only her index clung to mine. Her mouth formed my name, then she was gone, sucked into the vortex, her scream cut off instantly. The chamber fell silent. The spiral dimmed, shrinking, collapsing into nothing. The creature dissolved with it, limbs melting into shadow, spiral folding inward until the space was empty. Only the pillar remained, fractured but still standing, its heartbeat gone. I fell to my knees, chest heaving, sweat pouring down my face. My hands shook uncontrollably, rifle clattering to the floor. The silence pressed in, heavier than any sound. Kara was gone. The others were gone. I was alone. But as I sat there, trembling in the dark, I realized something worse. The fissure behind me had sealed. The way back was gone. The silence pressed in so thick it felt alive, like invisible hands clamped over my ears. I turned slowly, flashlight trembling in my grip, but the fissure we had entered through was gone. The rock wall stood smooth and unbroken, as if it had never split. My breath quickened, chest tightening until I thought my ribs might snap. I was sealed inside. The chamber's air grew hotter, damp sweat trickling down my spine beneath insulated gear. I tugged at the zipper to vent heat, the stink of rot and copper stronger now, curling into my nostrils until I gagged. My flashlight beam wavered across the spirals carved into the walls. They no longer looked like symbols, they looked like eyes. I forced myself to move. Standing still felt like surrender. My boots scraped on grit as I circled the chamber, running my hands along the rock, searching for a crack, a weakness, anything. Nothing. The stone was seamless, like the mountain itself had swallowed me. My pulse hammered, the sound too loud in the suffocating silence. Then, faintly, I heard it again. A heartbeat. Not the pillar this time. This one came from deeper within the mountain, steady and slow, vibrating through the floor. I followed it. A narrow passage opened on the far side of the chamber, half hidden by shadow. I hadn't noticed it before, or maybe it hadn't been there. The walls seemed to shift subtly, rearranging themselves when I wasn't looking. My flashlight beam revealed slick stone, spirals etched deeper, more complex, some interlocking into fractals that made my vision blur if I stared too long. The passage sloped downward. With every step, the heat intensified, the air thickening like wet wool. I wiped sweat from my brow, rifle heavy in my hands. My lungs burned. Still, I pushed on. Discipline carried me where fear tried to stop me. The passage widened into another cavern. This one was vast, the ceiling lost in shadow, the air vibrating with that colossal heartbeat. My flashlight swept across the ground and froze. Bodies. Dozens of them, scattered across the floor, half buried in moss. Some were fresh, faces twisted in terror, eyes open and glassy. Others were nothing but skeletons, flesh long rotted away. All of them knelt, hands clasped as if in prayer, their heads bent toward the center of the cavern. My throat constricted, my stomach churned, bile rising. I forced myself forward, each step crunching over bones. These weren't just the scientists. These were generations. Explorers, hunters, perhaps even ancient tribes who had stumbled here long before. The mountain had always taken them. At the cavern's center stood another pillar, larger than the first, spiraling higher, fused from bone, stone, and something black and glassy that absorbed the light. Embedded within it were faces, not skulls, but living faces frozen in the surface, mouths open in silent screams. Their eyes followed me as I moved, pupils dilating, blinking slowly as though still alive. The heartbeat thundered louder, syncing with mine until my chest felt ready to burst. My knees buckled under the pressure, a force that wasn't physical but psychological, bending my will. A voice rose from the pillar, not in sound but inside my skull. Words in no language I knew, yet I understood. Kneel. The command slammed into me like a hammer. My legs trembled, threatening to give. Training took over. I clenched my jaw, bit my tongue hard enough to taste blood. Pain was real, grounding me. I forced my knees to lock, spine straight, refusing. The faces in the pillar shifted, mouths widening, eyes bulging. They weren't carved, they were trapped. Kara's face was among them now and pressed into the surface, her mouth forming my name, eyes glistening with tears. Rage burned through my fear. I raised my rifle and emptied the magazine into the pillar. The shots rang out, sparks flying as bullets struck stone and bone. Chunks splintered, faces cracking. But instead of weakening, the heartbeat quickened, the cavern trembling. The pillar drank the violence, absorbed it. The floor split, fissures opening, molten light glowing from beneath. The trapped faces screamed silently, their mouths distorting into spirals. The voice in my skull grew louder, a chorus now. Kneel, kneel, kneel. My vision blurred. My arms went numb. I fell to one knee, rifle clattering to the floor. My head bowed against my will, pulled down by invisible chains. But I remembered something. Afghanistan, a sandstorm pinning my unit down, visibility near zero. A young soldier beside me had panicked, frozen, begging to run. I had grabbed his helmet and forced him to look at me, told him fear was a weapon you could use if you aimed it right. Focus on one thing that matters. I clung to that memory now. I forced my eyes to the floor, to the rifle lying in the grit. Steel. Real. My hands crawled toward it, fingers brushing the cold metal. The voices screamed louder, spirals burning into my mind, but I gripped the rifle, dragged it to me, forced myself upright. No, I growled, my voice raw. I don't kneel. I pulled the grenade from my vest, thumbed the pin. I didn't know if it would matter, but it was all I had left. I hurled it at the base of the pillar and dove behind a cluster of bones. The explosion rocked the cavern, fire and smoke choking the air. Shards of bone and stone rained down. The heartbeat faltered, stuttering wildly. Faces melted, screaming without sound, spirals collapsing. But when the dust cleared, the pillar still stood. Cracked, damaged, but alive. The voices quieted to a whisper, seething inside my skull. Not yet. Not enough. I staggered to my feet, coughing, lungs burning from the smoke. My flashlight flickered and died, leaving me in darkness lit only by the glow of molten cracks in the floor. The pillar pulsed, cracks spreading, black liquid oozing from its surface. The liquid crawled across the ground, tendrils reaching toward me, moving with deliberate hunger. I stumbled backward, boots slipping on bones. My hand brushed cold metal. A skeleton clutched a rusted flare gun in its grasp, fingers curled tight around it. Desperation surged. I tore it free, jammed a fresh flare into the chamber, aimed at the pillar. The flare roared to life, white-hot, slamming into the cracks. Fire erupted, brighter than anything I'd seen in years, searing my retinas. The black liquid writhed, recoiling, hissing as it burned. The heartbeat screamed, a deafening roar that shook the cavern to its core. The floor split wider. Heat surged upward, blistering my skin. Rocks tumbled from the ceiling. The entire mountain trembled, groaning like it was tearing itself apart. I didn't wait. I ran. Another tunnel opened at the far side of the cavern, wide and jagged, glowing with faint light. I sprinted toward it, lungs searing, legs barely carrying me. Behind me, the pillar collapsed with a final scream, a sound that would never leave my head. I plunged into the tunnel, the light growing brighter, until suddenly I was outside. Snow blinded me. Cold air slapped my face. I fell to my knees, gasping, eyes streaming. The mountain loomed behind me, silent now, its ridge black against the pale sky. The fissure was gone. The heartbeat was gone. But as I staggered to my feet, rifle heavy in my grip, I knew the truth. It wasn't destroyed, only buried again. And one day, it would wake. The tundra stretched endless and white, a cruel infinity of ice and stone. I stumbled forward, every step a battle. My lungs dragged in the frigid air, raw from smoke and heat. The rifle hung heavy across my chest, the flare gun clutched in one hand like a lifeline. Behind me, the mountain ridge was quiet, its jagged outlines stark against a bruised sky. Too quiet. I knew it hadn't ended. The silence was a pause, not a victory. Whatever ancient thing I had disturbed, it had only withdrawn, waiting for me to break. The snow crunched beneath my boots, the sound unnervingly loud in the vast emptiness. My breath billowed clouds that vanished into the wind. Each exhale tasted faintly of copper, metallic, the same taste I'd smelled in the tunnels. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes. Time blurred. My mind flickered with exhaustion and paranoia. Shadows danced at the edge of vision, shapes too tall, too thin, always gone when I turned. My ears rang with echoes of that command. Kneel. By late afternoon, the light dimmed. The Arctic sky melted into twilight far too early, the horizon bleeding into purple. My body ached, my knees threatening collapse, but I couldn't stop. Stopping meant sleep, and sleep meant surrender. I reached a frozen river, its surface fractured with jagged black cracks. I crouched, scooped a handful of snow into my mouth. The cold burned my teeth, numbing my tongue, but it gave me strength enough to push on. That's when I heard it, a sound behind me, footsteps, slow, deliberate. I froze, heart pounding. I turned slowly, rifle raised. The tundra was empty. Nothing but endless snow, but the sound continued. Crunch, crunch, as if someone mirrored my every step, just out of sight. I shouted into the emptiness, my voice ragged. "Come on then! Show yourself!" Silence. Then the snow at my feet shifted. I staggered back as the white surface rippled, a faint spiral forming in the ice. The cracks spread outward, spiraling like the carvings on the ridge. A hum rose, faint but growing, vibrating through my boots into my bones. "No," I growled, shaking my head, backing away. "Not again." The spiral deepened, and from beneath the ice, a shape pressed upward. A face. Kara's. Her mouth open in a silent scream, eyes wide, staring straight at me. Her hands clawed at the underside of the ice, fingers bloody as she beat against it. I stumbled backward, breath tearing out of me in ragged gasps. My mind screamed it wasn't real, but my heart hammered, telling me it was. The hum swelled until my teeth rattled. More faces appeared, pushing against the ice. Vega, Roland, the others. Dozens, hundreds, all screaming without sound, their mouths twisting into spirals. I turned and ran. Snow sprayed beneath my boots, the hum chasing me, vibrating the ground. My muscles burned, lungs of flame, but I forced myself onward. The horizon tilted, the sky spinning as exhaustion clawed at my vision. Finally, the sound faded. The ground stilled. I collapsed into the snow, chest heaving, sweat freezing against my skin. My hands shook violently, the rifle slipping from my grip. I lay there for what felt like hours, staring up at the endless gray sky. My heartbeat slowed, though the echo of that subterranean pulse still throbbed faintly in my skull. When I finally sat up, I noticed something that froze me colder than the air ever could. My breath. It no longer fogged the air. I exhaled again, sharp and deliberate. Nothing. No mist, no vapor, just empty air. My hands trembled. I pulled off a glove, stared at my bare skin. Faint greenish veins pulsed beneath the surface, glowing dimly in the twilight. The spirals etched into the ridge now traced across my veins, curling around my wrist, faint but unmistakable. I clenched my fist, fury choking me. "No, you don't get me. Not like the others." But even as I said it, I felt the truth gnawing inside me. I hadn't escaped. I'd carried something out. Night fell fast, the tundra drowning in darkness. Stars flickered faintly, weak against the void above. I knew I had to keep moving. Find shelter, find signal, something. I forced my body upright, stumbling south again. The world shifted subtly as I walked. The snow no longer crunched the same. The horizon wavered. Shapes flickered in the dark, too far to see clearly, but always moving parallel to me. I gripped the rifle tighter, muttering to myself a soldier's mantra. Adapt. Survive. One step, then another. But deep in my chest, beneath my heartbeat, another rhythm pulsed. Slow. Patient. The mountain's heartbeat. And with every mile I put between myself and the ridge, I realized it was no longer behind me. It was inside me. The farther I walked, the more I realized I wasn't alone, though I couldn't decide if the company was outside me or within. The tundra stretched barren in all directions, a frozen ocean of white and gray, but every so often I caught a flicker of motion at the edges of sight. Too tall, too lean, moving wrong, shadows pacing me across the horizon, never closer, never gone. I pressed forward anyway, forcing my body to obey. My legs moved stiffly like they weren't entirely mine, as though something deep in the muscles tugged against my will. I ignored it, focusing on one step, then the next. That mantra had saved me before. It would save me again. By midday, if midday meant anything under that bruised sky, I stopped to rest near a cluster of black stone outcrops. The rocks jutted from the snow like broken teeth, offering little shelter, but some illusion of cover. I knelt, unstrapped my pack, and forced down a ration bar. The taste was like chalk soaked in grease, but it was fuel. That's when I noticed my hands. The greenish veins had spread, curling up my forearms like vines beneath the skin. Spirals glowed faintly along my wrists, throbbing in rhythm with that second heartbeat in my chest. When I flexed my fingers, they twitched a half-second late, as though waiting for permission from something else. I slammed my fist into the rock, pain lancing through me, sharp and grounding. "I'm still here," I whispered through clenched teeth. But even as I said it, a voice answered, not from outside, from inside. You are never alone. I staggered back, heart hammering, breath ragged. The voice wasn't a sound, it was a thought that didn't belong to me, sliding slick into my skull. My knees buckled, and I pressed the rifle's cold barrel against my temple, steel anchoring me. Not yours, I growled. Not yours. The voice receded, but it left behind an aftertaste, like oil coating the back of my throat. I forced myself onward, south, always south. Hours blurred. The snow began to change beneath my boots. At first it was subtle, the faint impression of spirals in the ice, vanishing when I blinked. Then more blatant, entire ridges of snow bent in circular patterns, as though the land itself mimicked the carvings from the mountain. My chest tightened with each step, the second heartbeat stronger now, nearly eclipsing my own. Near dusk, I stumbled across a structure half buried in snow. My breath caught. A cabin, small, weathered, its roof sagging under ice. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney. Salvation. I approached cautiously, rifle raised. My boots crunched loudly in the silence. The cabin's windows were dark, glass frosted opaque. I pressed a hand to the door, wood rough beneath my palm, and pushed. It creaked open. Warmth rushed out. Real warmth. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, its light flickering across rough-hewn walls. A table sat in the center, laden with supplies, canned food, water jugs, blankets. Too perfect, too prepared. My instincts screamed trap. Still, the exhaustion was overwhelming. My body shook with cold and hunger. I stepped inside, bolted the door behind me. The warmth seeped into my bones, loosening tight muscles. I stripped off my gloves, held my hands toward the fire. The spirals beneath my skin glowed brighter in the orange light, writhing faintly, almost alive. I closed my eyes for only a moment. When I opened them, I wasn't alone. A man sat across the table. He was tall, thin, his parka hanging loose over a gaunt frame. His face was pale, eyes too large, pupils dilated until the irises were nearly gone. He smiled faintly, teeth too white. "You made it farther than most," he said, voice calm, almost kind. My rifle snapped up instantly, finger tight on the trigger. "Who the hell are you?" He tilted his head, unfazed by the weapon aimed at his chest. "Like you, a survivor. No one survives out here." "Exactly." His smile widened, unnatural. "Yet here you are." I kept my stance rigid, though the warmth and fatigue tugged at me. "What do you want?" His eyes glimmered, catching the firelight. "You already know. It chose you." My veins throbbed, the spirals burning beneath my skin. I clenched my jaw, shaking my head violently. "No, I'm not part of it." The man chuckled softly. "That's what they all say at first. But listen." He leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. "Do you feel it? The second rhythm? That isn't death. That's eternity." Rage surged, clearing the fog for a moment. I pressed the barrel closer to his chest. "If you're part of it, then you're already dead." His expression didn't change. "Then shoot." I pulled the trigger. The blast deafened in the small cabin, recoil slamming into my shoulder. The man's chest exploded backward, blood spattering across the table. He collapsed into the chair, head lolling. For a heartbeat, silence. Then he inhaled. The wound in his chest knit together, flesh sealing, blood flowing back into place. His head snapped upright, eyes glowing faint green. He smiled again, wider this time. "You see," he whispered, "there is no escape, only acceptance." I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. My hand twitched toward another grenade, but even as I reached, my arm locked mid-motion. My own muscles froze, resisting me. The spirals in my skin pulsed, glowing brighter, constricting my veins like chains. The man stood slowly, impossibly tall now, his shadow stretching across the cabin walls. "Soon," he said, "soon you'll understand." The fire guttered, smoke filling the room. The warmth turned suffocating, heat pressing against my chest until I gasped for air. My knees buckled. My rifle slipped from my grip, clattering to the floor. I fell onto my side, vision blurring, the man's shadow bending into a spiral that spun across the ceiling. His voice filled my skull, echoing with the others I had heard in the ridge. "Kneel." I screamed, slamming my forehead against the floor, the pain sharp and grounding. The spirals in my skin flickered, dimming slightly. My hand groped blindly, finding the flare gun. I fired it into the ceiling. The cabin erupted in white fire, blinding. Smoke poured down, the man's shadow writhing, twisting, shrieking in silence. I crawled through the smoke, kicking the door open, stumbling into the freezing night. The cold slammed into me like a fist, but it was pure, clean, real. Behind me, the cabin burned, flames licking the sky. The man's voice carried through the crackle of fire, soft, calm, still inside my head. You can burn everything around you, Eric, but you can't burn what's inside. I ran. The tundra swallowed me again, flames shrinking behind me until only darkness and snow remained. The heartbeat inside my chest pounded louder, stronger, and I knew the man was right. I wasn't just fighting to survive the mountain anymore. I was fighting myself. The tundra became a blur of white and gray as I ran, lungs heaving, legs trembling beneath me. The fire from the cabin faded behind, swallowed by distance and snow, but the words clung to me like frostbite. You can't burn what's inside. The second heartbeat throbbed louder now, filling my ears until it drowned the world. Every step I took seemed to echo with two rhythms, mine, frantic and desperate, and the other, steady, patient, ancient. I staggered across the ice, half blind, muttering curses, prayers, anything to keep my mind tethered. My breath came fast, though still no vapor marked the air. My body was betraying me, piece by piece. The spirals beneath my skin crawled higher up my arms, faint veins of light reaching toward my shoulders. I collapsed against a drift of snow, rifles slipping from numb fingers. The weight of exhaustion pressed down like a mountain. I wanted to close my eyes. Just for a moment. Just rest. But I knew what waited. Faces beneath the ice, voices in the dark, Kara, Vega, Roland, kneeling, begging me to join them. I forced myself upright, body shaking, teeth chattering. Survival had always been simple for me. Adapt, endure, fight. But this was different. This wasn't a firefight or an ambush. This was erosion. Something slow, steady, inevitable. And yet, even inevitability could be resisted. I pulled the sat phone from my chest rig. No signal bars, no lifeline. But I kept it in my hand anyway, staring at the blank screen, pretending it tethered me to a world beyond this frozen hell. The horizon shifted. At first I thought it was fatigue, hallucinations from lack of sleep, from hunger, from infection. But no. The horizon itself bent, a subtle curve where none should be, as though the earth were folding into a spiral. The wind carried a hum, faint, then louder, vibrating through the snow, through my bones. My knees buckled, my vision blurred. Shapes emerged from the distance, dozens of figures, tall and thin, gliding across the tundra. Their limbs bent wrong, their heads spirals of shadow. They moved in perfect rhythm, each step a heartbeat, closing the circle around me. I raised my rifle with trembling hands, chambered the last round. One bullet left. A soldier knows when the battle is lost, but surrender isn't in my blood. Come on, I whispered, voice breaking. Let's finish this. The figures stopped, the hum quieted, and from among them one stepped forward. Not a creature, a man. He wore tattered Arctic gear, beard frozen, eyes hollow. But I knew him. I had seen his photo on the wall of the research station, one of the scientists from decades ago listed as missing, presumed dead. His veins glowed faint green beneath his skin, spirals etched along his arms. You'll see, he said, voice calm, familiar like the man in the cabin. There's no end, only joining. I pressed the barrel of the rifle beneath my chin, finger hovering on the trigger. I'd rather die human, he smiled faintly. You think death will save you? You've already changed. The spirals on my arms pulsed brighter, crawling across my chest, constricting my heartbeat. My vision swam, my fingers twitched, the rifle felt heavier, slipping. I roared, forcing strength into my muscles, dragging the trigger back. Click. Empty. I stared at the weapon, disbelief flooding me. Had I miscounted, or had the bullet never been there? The man stepped closer, placing a pale hand on the barrel, gently lowering it. You don't fight steel with steel, he murmured. You fight surrender with acceptance. The circle of figures pressed closer, their spirals whirling, bending the air. The hum rose again, deafening, inside and outside me at once. My knees buckled, the weight of their will pressing me down. I fell, snow freezing against my face. My arms shook, straining to keep me upright. My head bowed unwillingly, inch by inch. The word tore through my mind, echoing with every heartbeat. Kneel, kneel, kneel. My hands clawed at the snow, my teeth ground together until it filled my mouth. No, I whispered. My voice was weak, ragged, but it was mine. I don't kneel. The figures closed in, spirals blazing brighter, swallowing the sky. The hum crescendoed, shattering thought-consuming will. My body trembled, spine bending against my command, and then silence. I lifted my head. The tundra was empty, no figures, no spirals, no hum, just snow stretching endless in every direction. My arms were bare, no spirals beneath the skin, no glow, just pale flesh, scarred and trembling. Relief flooded me and fear, because if it wasn't in me anymore, then it had left me alive for a reason. I staggered to my feet, clutching the sat phone, staring at the horizon. Somewhere beyond this wasteland, rescue might exist. A helicopter, a village, civilization. But as I turned south again, I saw the sky shift. The clouds above curled, spiraling slowly, faint green light pulsing in their depths. The mountain's heartbeat was gone from inside me. But it was in the sky now, waiting, watching. And I realized the truth with a chill deeper than the cold. I hadn't escaped anything. I had carried it out.